Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have had an awesome day so far. Raven has gone for a much-needed break, but I am taking over his duties now alongside Lothar. And we have what is perhaps going to be one of the highest level games we've seen so far in the whole tournament, perhaps. Germany and Ukraine, two of the real powerhouse teams in this tournament overall.
Ukraine, my pick when it comes to like the strength of the team in the entire tournament, I would say. Although I know Russia is the other team that is on par with them, but it's my personal pick.
Okay.
What about yours?
I mean, Russia was my pick. You mentioned them. To me, that is just an absolute powerhouse team put together. So much championship pedigree in there. But I would not be surprised if someone even picked out Germany as their pick for this entire thing. Germany, of course, have gone through one or two roster shuffles to get to the point where they're at right now, but life coach Viper, Camlan, Super JJ is nothing to sniff at, of course. Life coach, Super JJ, and to a lesser extent Camlan as well, are already good friends, practice partners, lab together for hours and hours a day, so they will already have that synergy down, as you can now take a look at some of the locations they will be playing from Germany here. A beautiful little European city, a little bit more modernized and industrial than some of the Eastern European locations you'll be seeing, but beautiful landscapes nonetheless.
That is true. Here we have with the Ukraine, very similar to Polish architecture, actually. So I feel like I'm watching my own country here. But when it comes to Ukraine, Kolento, when I was reading like his interviews, he's a really big patriot, you know?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
He was talking a lot about the country. He's like a big protagonist of the industry and so on, and he actually used the words "glory for Ukraine."
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. That's what we want to see in this tournament, right? Is people really, getting behind their countries and being proud to represent their nations on this global stage. And if Kolento is buying into that, then fantastic, all the better for it. But, the rest of the Ukraine team, nothing to sniff at either. When you talk about championship pedigree, Nyria, Dr. Hippie. These are two players that within recent memory have been extremely deep in Hearthstone Championship tournaments.
Very consistent.
Yes, Dr. Hippie, one of the most consistent players of last year. Nyria, of course, making it all the way through to championships in the inaugural event of this season. And then finally, rounding that out is one of the well-known hunter gods of Hearthstone in Nick Chipper, who he just adores playing Hunter, one of the innovators of a lot of aggressive and mid-range Hunter decks.
It's kind of adorable that his nickname is Chipper, and he can chip damage while playing Hunter with the hero power.
Sure.
Well, never mind. A bad joke. Bad joke. But let's go back to the teams.
Yes.
As you said, JJ, Life Coach, and Camlan were actually bootcamping for several months at Life Coach's house, and actually there right now, as you can see from the famous Life Coach cabinet in his house. They will be all playing together. Of course, both teams are together as well. It might be in one room, it might be in one room on TeamSpeak or whatever else they're using, Discord or Twitch app.
Other communication platforms are available. This is not a matter of, hey, Kolento is so overpowered, he can take on 3 members of the opposing team at once. These players have the option. They can choose and travel to play from the same location, or they can communicate over voice comms and screen sharing on whatever other method they're going through. So that option is completely up to the players. Germany, no surprise. They're well used, those 3 players at least, to traveling to Life Coach's house to play anyway, whereas Ukraine, it looks, are playing remotely and will be communicating with each other over voice comms.
That is. So now we see the order of the games. Camlan will be opening against Kolento, Life Coach against Dr. Hippie, Super JJ against Nick Chipper, Viper versus Nyria, and if it comes down to the last game, when it will be a 2-2 score, Super JJ and Kolento will get back to the game.
Yeah, always the interesting choice here, who you choose to put in the 4th position and who you choose to put as your ace match. Those are the other 3 games, or the other 2 games are, more or less picked at random because you don't have any information to base that on. But then the big pressure points, as you put it, I love that phrase. The final game to potentially clutch out the series, that 4th game, Viper up against Nyria, and then who you choose to recycle, who gets to have a regame, Super JJ versus Kolento. And if you are confused by this format in front of you, which you are well within your rights to be, it's fairly simple. All 9 classes have to be played, represented throughout the 4 players on each team. They must each have different classes from each other, and at the start of each game, you pick one of the 2 classes you've allocated to yourself to play it out. So we will see up to 4 of the 9 classes being played by each team in this series.
Pretty straightforward when you think about it.
More or less. We'll get there. We'll iterate on that as we go through this tournament over the next 10 weeks, and eventually we'll get better at explaining it, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, the graphic is actually pretty well done, so whoever just tunes in is like, okay, so the guy on the left plays the guys on the right, picks one of the classes here. It's pretty straightforward. But what is really cool about it, and you mentioned it, all classes have to be picked, and it affects the deck building like a lot. You need to tailor the entire lineup for the team the way that you have some matchups covered. The problem is the metagame is fresh. We just have the expansion released. Classes have different archetypes, so you need to prepare for a lot of angles. But now we have some informations about both players. Soto, what can you tell me about Kalento?
Yeah, Kalento, one or two of you may have heard of him. He's one of the very few players who have basically conquered Twitch and conquered the competitive scene. Not many players can say they've done that. Maybe Tice is the only other one really on this level of huge stream as well as massive major tournament results. Kalento, of course, right up there. But Camlan might be a little bit lesser known to some of you. I first got to know him at that Insomnia True Silver event that is listed there. It's one of his first big finishes. But also now representing Flow Esports and trying to break his way into the casting scene, and he will be joining, I believe, you for one of the weeks later on.
I'm not exactly sure which one will it be, but yes, he will be a guest caster for one of the broadcasts of HGG.
There you go. Camlan bringing a little bit of German flavor to this international event from behind the casting desk. But right now, it's not his words that matter. It's his card-slinging skills, as Raven likes to say in that advert that we roll before we get into the event. And Camlan is a fantastic player in his own right, but he has got his work cut out for him going up against Kalento. But this is where the teamwork comes into play because he has the might of Super JJ and Life Coach backing him up in person. Kalento, of course, has the support of the other 3 fantastic players on his team as well, but over voice comms instead.
And here we go, the turn 1 opening hands. Seems like Kamala is sporting a, well, mid-range version, I would say, because of the Rat Pack inclusion in the Hunter. Although we have now, again, we see Firefly in a Hunter deck. Seems like it fits, although it's not a beast. For Kalento, we know it's definitely an aggressive Druid with the living mana in the deck. Kept Innovate, of course, because it's one of the most powerful cards that actually allows you to forge that Innovate mana crystal into damage, because you accelerate minions, and those minions are made to have synergy with the entire deck. So buffs from Mark of the Lotus, quicker attacks, and so on will just ramp up the damage fast.
Yep, Kalento just keeping the Innovate there. Does pick up Enchanted Raven to play on 1, but nothing massively explosive to do with the Innovate just yet. Camlan, or the German team as a whole, choosing to 3-keep their hand, and their 1 returning card is the Alley Cat, so really strong opening. The Unleash the Hound's Keep, crucial in this matchup. When I have played Hunter against Aggro Druid in this new meta, Unleash the Hounds is so often the big swing turn that you need, whether whatever 2-drop you are pairing it with in your deck, you know, Dire Wolf, Scavenging Hyena, whatever it is, that is normally the position where you can just swing the board entirely.
That is true. Even you can just play turn 3 Emerald Companion Leok. Right. Turns out, Unleash the Hounds kills every single living mana that was played.
Yes. But this probably just going to be a Raven here for Kalento. If he wanted to really rush out, then he could just choose to use the Innovate as a coin and get the Squire, but no great value in that. Camlan is packing the Galaka Crawler in his Hunter deck, which, you know, it's a 2-3 beast. It's essentially River Crocolisk when it whiffs. So in Hunter, it seems to be the most common card where you just play it anyway, even if you're not particularly targeting towards Pirate Warrior, because sometimes you hit a Swashbuckler, sometimes you hit a Bloodsail Corsair in Aggro Druid. Coming back to this matchup, there's not too much downside in just having a spare River Crocolisk in your deck.
Even if someone just plays a Pirate, there's 100% patches in the deck as well.
Right.
So you, against Rogue, against Druid, against Warrior, you most likely, in like majority of the matchups, will have a target at some point. And even if you just played on curve, 2-3 is not terrible unless you're facing a Taunt Warrior. Then it's kind of like lackluster.
Then it's fairly mediocre, yeah. But since technically Taunt Warriors should be less likely to hit their War Axe due to keeping the quests. Although
that doesn't work
I
like
know,
that.
I know. Although most often at a high level, we're seeing Quest Warriors actually mulligan the quest away against Hunter just to maximize their chances of hitting Fiery War Axe and all those other good cards that they need. But since, in theory, there's less chance of them hitting it, just having a 2-3 on turn 2 can get through. But not relevant to this matchup. What's relevant is Kalento's desperate attempts here to just try and grab some early board control. The Innovate only being paired with the Defender of Argus for maximum efficacy right here, so he's just going to have to keep developing his board regularly. And if he doesn't choose to hero power here, that's going to be a potential beast left on the board for the Crackling Razormaw to come out and get a big adapt push.
That might be the reason why he will push for the hero power instead, but also he needs to plan ahead of time, and turn 3 seems like a great Innovate Argent Squire Defender of Argus. So you want to have another minion on board. So if you use the hero power this turn and kill both minions, you kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 kitties with 1 stone in this case. So seems to work. It's a great plan. You need that go like a crawler right now.
Correct sequencing, at least. He let objectively cuter cat live just that little bit longer, so that is important to the current Hearthstone metagame. But interesting to me is Kalento does not seem to be speaking a great deal on his camera. I've been trying to watch him out of the corner of his eyes.
He was.
Okay.
Yeah, he was.
Just wondering. There we go. There we go. We got
Unless it's a pantomime, and he's just screwing with us.
That seems unlikely. But yeah, I was just wondering, because obviously there's no mandate to say that you have to play as a team and communicate with your teammates. And I know some players, and even some players that played in Trinity Series, found that they actually struggled when they couldn't just get lost in their own thoughts and they had to communicate with 2 other people, and they found that distracting in some positions. So if you really, really want to in this format, you can choose to play on your own. But it does seem that Kalento is communicating at least a little with his teammates. And as we know, he's not the most talkative of people at the best of times anyway.
Well, I still remember the time when Striveko said, literally, well, I don't talk much to Kalento. I just don't understand him, really. Wait, what? He speaks actually decent English, but the fact is that some accents are really harder to understand to native speakers.
It's true, yeah, that is really true. Argent Squire Innovate Argus now does seem to be really powerful. You pointed this play out last turn, and it does seem strong, does allow that Enchanted Raven to pick up another value trade on the board now, as well as putting up a very annoying 2-2 Divine Shield Taunt to wall out the 1-1s on the board.
You know what? I was talking about it yesterday, and it seems like whenever players can communicate in their own language, they're way more cheerful than usual, you know?
Are you saying speaking English makes people miserable?
I think it's just not speaking English per se, but it's just speaking in a non-native language makes them more, you know, kind of like stressed out.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just an extra thing to think about, right? It just complicates things just that little bit more to have to translate yourself at all times. And, you know, that was a niche that we saw in Trinity Series that's not a factor here. You know, those players were kind of asked to communicate in English so we could listen to them. Whereas here, of course, so many different nationalities, many of whom probably don't even speak good English, the players are going to be communicating in their natural languages.
That is correct. Now let's see. This is a complicated turn. Unleash the Hounds adds 3 damage that can be transferred to the minions. So basically you have 6 damage. That is still not enough to clear the board because the entire board of Kalento's and the Ukrainian team actually is 8 when you count Divine Shield as 1. So it's not enough damage with the Unleash the Hounds. So what are the plans? If you just go for the Annual Companion and you get a Leok, that's a good trade.
Leok's really strong, yeah.
Leok is really a good outcome, but what if you get Huffer?
Yes, Huffer would be pretty much just a disaster here, whereas Misha would be pretty solid. So it's actually a fairly just even roll on all 3 of them, and they got the middling option, which is a perfectly fine outcome for them. Again, normally, of course, when you're ahead on board and you're just pushing for damage, the Huffer is the dream, but in this case, it would have been completely disastrous for them.
That's something. But it's still not looking great for Hunter unless they will get some fantastic draws in the future, because now the hand is pretty not reactive at all. The only card that is actually reactive is the Unleash the Hounds. So a Hyena would be a great draw for the next turn, but now doesn't look great. Especially important to pop out that Divine Shield because they are aware that Druid is just playing a lot of buffs.
Yes.
Every single buff on the Divine Shield is just like begging for trouble. A single Savage Roar kills the Misha, and it doesn't buy them any value at all.
And because the Divine Shield has been popped, it's actually a pretty awkward turn for Kalento and the Ukraine. Savage Roar can be used, but it's just not that great on board. He'd trade out the Misha and then push 6 damage to face with the Argus and his hero. But still, he's not really developing behind that. He gives pretty much a free turn of tempo over to Camlan and Germany. But Mark of the Lotus and Hero Power is pretty much just the same thing.
What about Golak and Mark of the Lotus past the turn?
It's an interesting possibility. Then you're looking to Hero Power the next turn to deal with the 4-1 Misha that would be left over. So you'd be kind of trusting your deck to pick up a decent top deck at that point, because I don't think you'd be looking to Savage Roar at that point either. So yeah, it's really close and still not the greatest use of Savage Roar, but he does remain a little bit ahead on board at least. But this is now Germany's opportunity to just take this game by the horns here and really develop a powerful board.
There was still an option, as you said, the Hero Power next turn to deal with the 4-1 Misha, but at the same time, if you have 5 mana next turn, you can just use Savage Roar anyway, and then you have 2 mana spare to develop the board, because you use the 2 attack on your hero to trade with the Misha.
That's fair. I think they were also just scared of Houndmaster coming down, though, just leaving the Beast on the board. If they didn't deal with it, of course, turn 4 Houndmaster, letting your opponent Houndmaster on curve is one of the most brutal things that Hunter can do to you. So I think Kalento was just happy to more or less reset there and just try and develop moving forward. I'm
really happy that Red Pack actually found a place in the game, because I always thought it's a very powerful card, but now with the ability to just the meta kind of slowed down, so you can actually play the Red Pack, and with huge amount of buffs with the Crackling Reservoir and the Houndmaster in the deck, you actually have a lot of value. So in this case, so okay, the Golak Crawler didn't actually eat anything. It just got a buff from Mark of Ishar.
Yes.
It's a beast, so it did draw a card. A perfect synergy for this deck. A lot of people are actually thinking about building a more mid-range beast druid, but it just turns out a faster deck is a better version of the beast. Yeah, I think I've played against a couple of people on ladder trying a more mid-rangey variant very, very early on while I was still climbing. And it just didn't really seem that effective to me. It wasn't that powerful against the very efficient control decks, and it was just getting swarmed by the aggressive decks in my experience. So this far more aggressive version with the Living Mana or Bittertide Hydra or whatever you choose your late game to be, this is one of my picks for one of the strongest decks in the format right now. It's not looking too fantastic for Kalento just yet, because he is very, very dry on resources, and the big plays from Germany's Hunter are going to start coming down now and really put the hurting on Kalento in this position. Oh my god, this turn. Just wanted to say that Menagerie Warden on Hydra feels great. Yeah. But okay, back to the game. Houndmaster allows the Red Pack and the Flame Elemental to trade with the Golaka Crawler, a very powerful move, although you lose the Taunt minion. So I'm not exactly sure if it's the best option, but it feels like just build up the board so much. I feel like, yeah, the value trade into the Defender of Argus is probably just a little bit better here, just making sure. I mean, it's not like Aggro Druid is going to have any way to prevent this Rat Pack eventually giving the 4/1/1s, so you might as well just stretch the maximum value out of the 4/2 body while you can do it. This Golaka Crawler, sure, if it gets to hit face this turn, that is a significant chunk of damage going through, but the amount of board dominance that Germany have here with all these 1/1s that are going to spawn, a race probably works out in their favor in this position, especially as they've already seen a Savage Roar get used. That is true. Mark of the Lotus now, first one, is getting played. It's getting decent value, +4/+4 spread out on 4 bodies. For 1 mana, it's actually a really decent value, but a decent value is also that Rat Pack. 3 mana, and you got 4/4, which is the same as Mark of the Lotus in this case, for 0 investment. Yes. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. It was printed in, the Handbuff set, essentially. Like, people are like, oh, you can buff this up using the Handbuff mechanics and get value out of it that way. Turns out the card's just good enough just to play on turn 3 and have that forever threat of Houndmaster, because if you're playing against Hunter... Or this one. Oh, that Razormaw is huge. But yeah, if you're playing against Hunter, anytime a Rat Pack gets dropped, you're almost forced to pop it open yourself and give them the full value immediately. So that prevents what would normally be quite a slow card actually being
slow because your opponent is forced to give you the value straight away to play around Houndmaster and Crackling Razor.
After like reevaluating the entire expansion, I think Crackling Reservoir is my favorite card right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's powerful. It's horribly powerful actually when you think about it. Even when you just drop it without anything, there's no drawback. It's a 2-mana 3/2 minion. As a hunter player, you just want to have an aggressive minion anyway. But if you just get that synergy, so if it's either poisonous on a 1/1, if it's a death rattle with the plants, still very powerful. But just like buffing your red pack with +3 attack, trading up, getting 5 minions out of it, feels incredibly powerful. So versatile. Adapt, really, I think like after Discovery, adapt is the new keyword that actually makes sense for Hearthstone.
Interesting.
Like when it comes to the possibilities of the digital medium.
Sure, yeah, right. Taking advantage of things that you can't do as well in physical card games. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But meanwhile, while we were having that conversation, Camlan's brutal Unleash the Hounds turn alongside that Razormaw has given him complete board dominance. And I loved that while he was making that kind of complex Unleash the Hounds play, he was working out, how much board space he had. Do I summon the extra dogs or do I trade off some minions first to make more room on the board for the dogs? He leant right forward into his camera. And it appears that the German team does not have a lot of respect for the card Egg Napper as they burst out laughing immediately as they saw that card hit the board.
Well, it's not really powerful when you have such a board. No. A 1/1 plant, which just has super cute artwork, just trades with the Egg Napper. Then the 2 1/1s that are getting spawned are not really great against a second Unleash the Hounds. It's not looking good for Kolento in Ukraine.
And it's especially not looking good because Unleash the Hounds #2 has been drawn as well. This sweeps the board yet again. And yes, Kolento in the Ukraine got a lot of damage through early, but Aggro Druid is not a deck that can burst you from hand. They need to maintain board control at all times. They don't really play charge minions outside of patches most of the time, sometimes bluegills if you're running the Finja package. So they need to get stuff to stick on board and then rely on the board buffs and Savage Roar to close out the game. So although Camlan and Germany are down at 14 at this point, exactly. If you draw cards like this, they're not going to get you too far if you do not have board control in the first place.
It's like a weaker Crackling Razormaw. 2 mana, 3/2 or above.
Yeah, as opposed to, you can have both. Yeah. Crackling Razormaw, you may have your cake and eat it too, whereas poor old Druids have to choose.
Very difficult situation for Ukraine. The quality of draws for Hunter will be just way higher than for the Druid. Oh, Knife Juggler. Interesting. So, because of the fact that you play Fireflies, you probably include the Knife Jugglers. Right. Because you increase the amount of cards that can spawn the additional juggles in this case. So you have red packs, you have, of course, the Death Rattle adapt from Crackling Razormaw. Firefly in itself is just 2 mana, 2 minions for 1 card. That's actually pretty decent synergy with the Knife Juggler. So it's an interesting inclusion. Not every hunter plays actually the Knife Juggler.
Yeah, it can be useful just to break some early struggles for board control. Obviously, you have Alley Cat that can go alongside it. That's nice in the early game. You have Kindly Grandmother as well that can just be on the board, pop as a Death Rattle, get you an early game knife as well that might break a board tie in your favor. So it does make a little bit of sense. It's not a card personally that I've been favoring in Hunter. But interesting, I think Germany have actually been settled on these lists for quite some time. Because I remember Life Coach was doing commentary during his Throne of Cards event that he did recently, and he said that Team Germany had already kind of built their list together and were fairly happy, reasonably confident that they were not going to change them up until the event.
Oh.
Well, that is lethal represented on board now, so Camlan does have to trade for Germany in this position. Living Mana, such a powerful card. Every time, every situation I have drawn this card in or seen this card played in, it continues to impress me.
Incredible. Incredible. That was the only draw to keep Ukraine in the game that was so much behind.
That is absolutely dead.
It was draw.
They cannot play it.
Yes.
Even if they play it and trade off 3 minions, that is still lethal on board trading into the Hydra.
Every single, like, you can put it into perspective. Every single minion now has 3 attack.
Yes, exactly.
Well, unless it's, you know, you can trade 4 minions into that Hydra. So 4 minions of those have 3 attacks. So it's definitely the worst possible draw for Germany and the best possible draw for Ukraine.
And Kalento just giggling away to himself. He knows how important that living mana draw was here, and now he's going to have 3 mana on his next turn, even if nothing is traded into. But Camlan and Germany must trade here because there is just lethal being face down on board. So now, Savage Roar, Power of the Wild, Mark of the Lotus, all would have been huge here. Bloodsail Corsair should summon the patches, so that's an extra 1 damage being pushed here as well.
That's unlucky for Germany, but lucky for Ukraine. Seems like they're gonna take it back. Living mana, you can fully witness the card that everyone had a problem to evaluate.
Not me. I said this card was going to be nuts.
Okay.
I'm proud of this one. I really didn't see too many people talking about it, but the more and more I thought about it, I thought it would be powerful in aggressive decks like this and token decks. I also, this is the part I got wrong, I did expect it to potentially be used in some mid-range slower decks as well. I know Sixo theorized that it might get played as a one-of in Jade Druid, for example, just to potentially get some more ramp effects out alongside even Spirit Singer Umbra if you want to go for that dream. But still, in the meantime, Kalento off the back of his living mana is just pushing a ton of damage through here, setting up lethal for himself. That Bittertide Hydra, complete dead card in hand for Germany. What can they even draw that would get them out of this mess? There needs to randomly be an explosive trap in their deck.
That would have been amazing. But it's a Firefly. There is some fire, but it's not an explosive trap, and that's it. They even used the double Unleash the Hounds in previous stages of the game.
Yes.
That was literally the one card for Ukraine that could have won them the game.
Insane. I mean, Kalento and the Ukraine just seemed so far behind in that game. And then suddenly just living mana off the top, hero power, hit face, fill the board with 7 2/2s. Yes, it took that key draw from Germany to pick up the Bittertide Hydra, which was essentially not drawing a card that turn. No matter what they did, if they played Hydra, they died on board to the 2/2s, just trading into it for 3 damage. But living mana just flipping that game on its head completely. What looked like a guaranteed win for Germany instead goes onto the scoreboard for Ukraine.
They look great. When you think about it, all the aggro decks nowadays, they don't have card draw, right? So losing an entire draw is detrimental. Like it's so much lost value. Incredible. And now second match will be Life Coach versus Dr. Hippie with the Priest versus Mage. So now it all comes down also to the archetype of the Mage. We might guess that the Priest will be probably some version of a Dragon Priest. Life Coach was always a huge fan of that archetype. While Dr. Hippie, I don't really know his playstyle so well with the Mage. I'm just guessing it's Quest Mage because it's
Dr. Hippie is actually one of the OG Freeze Mages. He is one of the Freeze Mage aficionados. He was actually, in one season, this was the very first thing we ever learned about Dr. Hippie. He was the first player to hit Legend in, I believe, January 2016. He was #1 first player to hit Legend, and he did it with Freeze Mage. So he has a lot of dedication to that deck, and there is a deck coming out from Monsanto, one of the best combo deck players in the world, that has now been given the laughing seal of approval as a fantastic Freeze Mage list. Freeze Mage may be back.
All right.
Even without Ice Lance, it looks like Freeze Mage has kept on trucking.
Well, I would love to see that because Freeze Mage is one of the iconic decks of Hearthstone as well.
Yeah. It really is. A lot of people were upset when it looked like Freeze Mage was going to bite the dust forever. Ice Lance seemed like such a crucial card that it was going to be impossible for them to overcome the loss of that. But it seems that just, through Antonidas coming back in for some extra burn, and now the power of Arcanologist, which is just an insanely good card for Freeze Mage, perhaps even more so than for the Quest Mage, that deck is still alive and kicking. The one proviso I will add to this is that, these lineups have been submitted in advance, and that Freeze Mage is only just starting to develop over the last couple of days.
Good point.
So if this is, based on a very, very early game submission from Dr. Hippie, it might have to end up being that Quest Mage instead.
You simply don't have enough fucks. Yeah.
I thought you literally just came up with that, and then I looked down and saw that, no. In case you're wondering, responsible for generating these facts for us is TJ Azumo QT Sanders. So if you're wondering why they all seem to be slightly ridiculous, it's because the king of Hearthstone meme casting himself has put them together for us.
Thank you, TJ.
Yes.
Much appreciated. But look at that. Dr. Hippie has earned over $200,000 in Hearthstone tournaments, putting him in the 3rd place in the entire world when it comes to winnings.
Yeah, just a massive 2016 for Dr. Hippie. He's one of the big breakout successes of the Hearthstone Championship Tour, a player that was an absolute unknown coming into 2016 HCT, a player that we as the casters had to scramble to research when he qualified for a championship just to be able to, you know, tell you guys who he was. And then all of a sudden, he wrote his own story himself because he just kept winning throughout the entire year, eventually losing only in the finals of BlizzCon of the World Championship to the eventual winner, Pavel.
And we had Russia versus Ukraine, actually, in that final.
Yes, we did.
So we might have that here as well. There are 2 very powerful teams. But now, Ukraine versus Germany, it seems that you are right.
There is no quest in that opening hand, Lothar, which means we are looking at a freeze mage from Dr. Hippie. Freeze is back, ladies and gentlemen, and Freeze coming up against a Priest is historically always a fantastic matchup for the Freeze Mage, just purely from the amount of time that you get due to Priest's inability to put good pressure onto you.
That is very correct, and it seems like Life Coach is even sporting the, let's say, miracle or standard version of Priest, not a dragon version, so it might even be worse, apart from maybe a Lyra draw, but we have been hyping Lyra for the 2 days straight, and we never have seen it yet. Maybe this time.
Hey, Mike Dene tried to hype it for us before the card even came out, and everyone made fun of him. He said on stream this card might be too strong, and then everyone saw it got revealed and went, are you insane? It turns out it's actually just really, really strong.
It's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But, okay, can you actually tell me more about the new Freeze Mage version?
So obviously the cards you're losing are Ice Lance. They're out of the window straight away. You're playing Arcanologist now, so you more consistently draw your Ice Block and Ice Barriers, and because of that, you are usually now playing 2 Ice Barriers all the time, which was not always the case, just so your Arcanologists always get value. So if you draw a couple of secrets first, you still have them in the deck to draw with the Arcanologist.
Which is interesting, because even when we were playing 2 Mad Scientists back in the day, there was still only 3 secrets in the deck.
I mean, yes, there's still definitely some lists with 4 around, but of course, remember, you're still trying to fill like some card slots in the deck that you didn't have back then. But now you're playing Pyroblast for some extra reach, you have the Fireballs, you've lost Forgotten Torch as well, so you're trying to fill the gap with those. Primarily, I haven't seen lists playing Flame Strike, just the Blizzards and the Frost Novas for board stall. And then Primordial Glyph actually sometimes comes into the deck as well, alongside Antonidas as that ultimate late game threat.
Primordial Glyph seems to be one of the best cards in the set, at least to me. I actually had it in my top 5 in the 2nd or 3rd place, can't remember right now, but it's very powerful, and especially in decks when you can just combine it with like Antonidas effects, right? Not only you get a cheap spell, because you play the Primal Glyph and just have, you know, maybe a 0 mana Frostbolt, an example, you also get a Fireball or 2 Fireballs out of it instantly. So it puts a lot of damage into your hand, which you then can combine with the Falnos, because the newer version are not playing Kobolds anymore because you lost Ice Lancers.
Yes, exactly. It does mean that in situations like this, like let's say this was old Freeze Mage with Kobold, double Ice Lance, double Forgotten Torch, all of the burn. You know, you have, over the course of the game, you know, more than 60 damage in your deck that you can allocate. So in this kind of situation, you might see this Cleric just get Frostbolted or Forgotten Torched just to, you know, buy a bunch of time, prevent Priest drawing cards. With this new Freeze Mage, you're now in a spot where every single burn card is extremely valuable to you. That's why you see Dr. Hippie just take every single second that turn to make sure that bolting that Cleric was the correct decision.
And it had some implications. Not bolting the Cleric can actually give some value to a couple Talon Priests, an example, that can be played. And Ukraine didn't see a single card apart from the Cleric yet, so they couldn't know what kind of priest it is. Playing Doomsayer, although will kill the Cleric, will give a card advantage to the Priest.
Right.
Because they could just attack into the Doomsayer, heal it up, gain a card. So it's basically a fair deal for the Priest. Lose one card, they gain one card. A Mage just lost one card, so it's okay. The tempo is lost, but in this matchup, the tempo is not that important because you know you're not going to be fast enough to kill the Freeze Mage anyway.
Yeah, it's basically with Priest, you know, you're not going to rush them down turn 6, turn 7, turn 8. Your goal is just to be pressuring their ice block by turn 9 so that they can't just freely Alexstrasza you, right? They don't have that default option to just Alexstrasza and just set you on the defensive for the rest of the game. So that's going to be Germany's goal, although their goal right now seems to just be have a good time. You know, of any of the teams in this tournament, these three are probably the closest friends, you know, outside of the game of any team that you will see. So it's great to see people just having a good time while playing together in this event, whereas Dr. Hippie, in stark contrast, is a man that, you know, has a good sense of humor when it comes out, but is generally a fairly quiet and reserved guy in his own right.
Yeah, that's true. I actually never seen him in a different composure than this.
Yeah, that is just the Dr. Hippie power stance right there.
All right, let's go back to the Priest because it seems they're in trouble. The draws are not there. Like, I mean, Divine Spirit right now, without the second part of the combo with Inner Fire, doesn't really do much. Although, historically speaking, especially with this version of Freeze Mage, every single minion with high HP will be just very difficult to remove.
Yes.
And as you said, if you remove some damage from your deck, you might actually not finish the game.
Yeah, it's very, very different dynamic with this new version of Freeze Mage now for that exact reason. You know, with old Freeze Mage, even Fireball on turn 4 just to take a big threat off the board. I think, you know, the equivalent of this matchup before the standard rotation was the Dragon Priest up against the Kobold Freeze Mage. And say, you know, Draconid Operative comes rounded out around this point of the game. Fireballing that Draconid Operative was perfectly fine for you as the Freeze Mage because you had so much damage to spare. But now Dr. Hippie has to find some kind of answer to this Acolyte of Pain, which now not only threatens to draw a ton of resources for Germany and for Life Coach, but it also is a huge Inner Fire threat at any point now.
It is so funny, man. Inner Fire, Stone Tusk Boar. What else do we have from those cards? You know, that were Wisp even. Right?
Yeah, I've seen people playing Wisp in Quest Rogue. That is how ludicrous that deck is. Apparently, Wisp is now a playable card.
It's so weird to see those all, like, you know, kind of cards that were put into the garbage bin. I was like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to straighten out those cards right now from the garbage bin and play them in my decks because they seem to be decent. And Inner Fire and Divine Spirit were cards that were just made fun of, right, in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some players were playing those decks in like rank 20 or something like that, just for fun, because it's ridiculous to play. But now it's a really competitive deck.
And we've seen it happen a couple of times in the past few months as well. You know, we've seen cards like Corruption, which was considered one of the worst cards in the game, being played in Arena Lock for a while. So it goes to show you that, you know, developing metagames can change perceptions of cards at any given point. But now, that second Divine Spirit means that any given Inner Fire draw, when it is picked up by Life Coach in Germany, is going to be crushing in this situation if Dr. Hippie cannot consistently freeze this board.
He needs to hit the second Doomsayer to deal with that board. The only problem is, it's really tough right now to get that card, right? It's like 1 out of, I think, 18? 19 maybe? So already one Doomsayer was destroyed by the Shadow Ward Pain. So it's really a crucial card. The damage is not there yet. So he might actually just draw cards this turn? Get more value?
Well, he has 9 cards in hand right now, so if he Arcane Intellects, he'll put himself up to 10 immediately, and then the rest of the cards he can play that turn, like Blood Mage, Loot Hoarder, etc., would recycle a card anyway and put him in the position where he might burn.
He can always play Coin Ice Block just to develop something on the board. Right?
It's true, but he can also go Ice Block Loot Hoarder this turn, and the Coin is actually a valuable resource to this deck again because you're bringing Antonidas back into the build again, which means that, you know, getting value out of the Coin where you can is actually pretty useful to you. But Dr. Hippie choosing to hold back the Loot Hoarder here because he does not want to...
Oh.
Wow.
That's actually 2 fireballs for 4 mana.
That is 12 damage to face. Greater Healing Potion, not a card that I've seen being played in these Priest decks, but this is clearly just that extra bit of stability, this deck being aimed at the aggressive decks in the format. And here it's working, you know, conversely to that. It's being an incredible card to potentially make this Priest more aggressive than it usually is against one of the most oppressive controlling decks in the meta.
That seems like a good play this turn as well. Your opponent pinged the Alkanized Soul Priest last turn, so he obviously has a plan to kill it. Maybe in the upcoming turn, maybe in 2 turns. But if you want to just keep it in your hand, then that means you would like to wait for post-Alexstrasza turn with the Greater Heal. So in this case, he goes for the Divine Spirit draw, Radiant Elemental. Interesting.
So here is the thinking now from the German team. They're saying, okay, I'm making a huge Acolyte of Pain here, which probably doesn't get killed anytime soon. I'm drawing through my deck, so if I draw Inner Fire, that kind of threatens to pop ice blocks anyway. And now, the thing that we haven't really considered with the Greater Healing Potion is, yes, it's fantastic right now for 12 damage. It's also essentially a Reno after you get Alexstrasza. It puts you straight back up to 27. Alongside the hero power, that pushes you then to 29. So Life Coach is probably looking at this the other way than that you did immediately, which is seeing it as an aggressive card. He's probably just looking at it and saying, I can use this to just outlast the damage from the deck, because as we've mentioned so many times already, the damage is massively reduced from this deck in its current form.
That is true. If you get that one Shadow Ward Death for the Alexstrasza and then heal back up with the Grading Healing Potion, it probably will be okay unless Antonida's already got like 4 fireballs.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
Wow, that is a huge draw.
That is actually insane. You can clear the board, draw cards, and heal.
Yes.
That is insane.
Pyro, Potion of Madness. He can draw the card first here, yeah, and then Pyro, Potion of Madness. Although, actually, this is a little strange, because now the Potion of Madness... No, it's still fine. It's still perfectly fine, right?
Because he will still the 2/2 minion anyway, right?
It doesn't matter
because it still gets deals.
And the Pyro goes off, procs, draws a card. He can now still Circle of Healing to draw another card off the Acolyte of Pain after he's traded. Pyromancer as well. He could choose to go all in on the card draw here, but that is just another 3/2 minion that he can choose to drop on the board at some point, because of course if he plays the Pyro and circles, the Pyros will kill each other by proccing twice, although drawing 2 cards off the Acolyte instead of 1.
Still think 1 Circle of Healing with 1 Pyromancer is just strictly better.
Yep, I like it.
You still have some board presence to deal some damage. And you have 4 mana that can actually use if you draw something that can be relevant.
There's just more healing.
That is an interesting deck. Do you think it's actually tailored against Freeze Mages?
I would not expect, although there is a Flame Strike in Dr. Hippie's list, which is surprising to me a little bit as well, but yeah, I would imagine these are anti-aggro techs that Freeze Mage is just getting caught in the crossfire of. Like, a lot of the cards that are effective as tech choices against aggro are also just by nature of, you know, being healing defensive cards, end up being quite strong about Freeze Mage as well. So I expect that's what we're seeing happen here. But it's just a happy coincidence, most likely, for Team Germany that they've managed to queue up this heal priest, this insane healing priest up against Freeze Mage.
This is hilarious to cast, actually, because we don't know what will happen next turn.
No idea.
This priest might draw Valen.
He could draw just about any card in Hearthstone next turn, and it would not be the most surprising thing we've seen.
Not a buff card for that Acolyte of Pain. He is not going anywhere.
Powered Shield looks good to me. It's got down to that point now where if Life Coach actually wants to pressure in any way, he's going to have to start playing some of these healing effects. Like Darkshire Alchemist is going to hit the board just to have a Yeti in play. He's got more than enough healing to keep himself covered, I think, over the eventual Alexstrasza.
Especially with that Shadow Ward Death in his hand already.
Exactly, yeah. So if Alexstrasza comes down at any point, it's just Death the Alex, Greater Healing Potion yourself, Hero Power yourself, you're back at 29. If Dr. Hippie starts to burn you from there, you then have Binding Heal and Hero Power again the next turn to get out of range again. So I think the Yeti coming down here looks pretty solid, and then the Powered Shield is going to come down on the Alchemist just to make both minions on board extremely difficult to remove.
It's a good decision, definitely a good decision. Since we also don't know how many Inner Fires are in the deck, it actually makes no sense as well to buff the Acolyte of Pain above some damage, because then you might not be able to proc the Ice Block on a low health.
Sure.
Because it will be just too much damage.
Right.
your opponent will have 20 HP and you'll attack for 22, and suddenly he's still at 20 HP after the ice block.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Does have to be very careful here with Inner Fire as to what numbers he chooses to deal, because popping the ice block is all well and good, but if they can just, freeze your board and deal with your minion, even potentially pick up a polymorph of Primordial Glyph if that is in the deck, although seeing now Dirty Rat and Flame Strike coming in, maybe Glyph is one of the cards that is missing in action from Dr. Hippie's deck, but we will see as things progress, because it seems like there's a pretty good chance that Dr. Hippie gets to see the majority of his deck this game.
Or both, even. Second ice block is being drawn, and there's an Antonidas already in the hand with the coin, and the Frost Nova allows you to get two fireballs and be safe with damage at least.
No minions in hand. You see a little cock of the head there from Dr. Hippie. Doesn't really know what to expect now. No real idea what he's up against. Just a handful of spells at this point. Plays out Loot Hoarder, which could be a little dangerous since you just saw a handful of spells. There could be another Potion of Madness making up one of those cards in hand, which would be punishing for that Loot Hoarder, but...
Not disastrous, but a little bit punishing.
Exactly. Yes. But yeah, Life Coach, just no real great proactive options here, and you can see why he turned down the option of going aggressive on the previous turn, right? Because if he was just going to draw this for the rest of his deck, then that was probably not going to be too effective.
I really like the fact that he didn't use the Shadow Word Pain instantly on the Dirty Rat, because you need to keep it against the second Doomsday. It's definitely needed, otherwise you have no way of dealing with it in just single swing, so you will lose your entire board, and now it's instrumental to keep that Acolyte of Pain alive as much as possible before you draw the Inner Fire. Now we have seen the Inner Fire being drawn, so they can plan the aggressive push. The question is, how do you actually do that right now? Do you use the... well, the entire hand is just heals. So you can't really plan at least one more turn, because you still will be you'll have to push through the Taunt Minion. Most likely the Darkshire Alchemist will be killed next turn. The Acolyte of Pain will just get ignored, so he won't be able to attack through the minion first, because he needs to attack into the Taunt Minion. So there's at least 2 or 3 more turns of not attacking with the Inner Fire.
It's gonna be difficult to get it through, but picking up that Inner Fire is definitely a huge deal. When Dr. Hippie, the more and more turns pass from Dr. Hippie's perspective, he knows the more and more likely it is that that Inner Fire is getting drawn. He got the news on the previous turn with the Dirty Rat that the hand is full of spells, although he will have a fairly clean read that none of those spells were Inner Fire at that point, since that Acolyte has been hanging around for so long.
Yeah.
But he knows the longer he waits, the more likely that Inner Fire is to come out, which means with each extra turn that passes, the temptation to just freeze the board every turn is growing ever and ever higher for Dr. Hippie.
It's interesting turn. So many ways you can deal with this. He chooses to use the Blizzard with the Falnos, and I don't blame him, because now he's able to preserve some damage. The Fireball that he has in his hand is still very instrumental to the entire matchup. So even saving that 6 damage here and just gaining the Blizzard value might be very important.
Blood Mage left on the board. No target to trade it into if there was another Potion of Madness, which is an important situation for Dr. Hippie to set up. But I think there's a read that Dr. Hippie will have in this position where he saw a handful of spells on the turn where he played Dirty Rat. I think that was 4 spells in total were in hand.
That was 4, yes.
So even if you're not expecting any of these ridiculous cards that Life Coach has, like a Greater Healing Potion, which you almost certainly have no read on, you'd expect one of those cards to be Shadow Word Death. So I think Dr. Hippie here is going to try and get to his Alexstrasza first and get the Alexstrasza deathed, and then reach the point where Antonidas and Frost Nova can potentially get him the extra damage that he needs to push over the line from that point, if there is healing coming out from Life Coach. That's the only potential win condition I see, and based on the information that Dr. Hippie has had this game, I would not be surprised if that's the line of victory that he sees as well.
Might be the case that you're right, but at the same time, if he just waits and waits and waits, the second Shadow Word Death will be drawn as well.
That is fair as well, yeah. especially with so many cards getting drawn by this Acolyte, and there is no other way to freeze it again without dealing damage to it. No way to, you know, lock it out of the game without dealing damage to it, especially...
Well, Frost Nova.
Right, I was saying, if you're reserving that Frost Nova with your Antonidas turn, which I imagine is the long-term plan, then you don't have any other way to really interact too well with it.
Such an awkward spot for Dr. Hippie. Like, for Life Coach, it's pretty easy to make a plan, because he knows exactly what the Freeze Mage wants to achieve. But for Dr. Hippie, every single card that Germany will draw is a big question mark.
Right.
It can be actually anything. Next turn can be just Elise.
It could. Next turn could be literally anything at this point. Although Dr. Hippie himself hasn't seen any of the particularly strange cards, the ones that we're reacting to. He's just seen this kind of Divine Spirit Inner Fire Lyra Priest kind of play out fairly as it would be expected to. The really strange cards like Greater Healing Potion are not things that he's been exposed to yet, and it looks like he is now going to take the risk with the Antonidas. This does surprise me, just because of that Dirty Rat read. He should be fairly confident that there is a Shadow Word Death in hand, but using Coin Fireball here just to generate 2 more Fireballs for his hands, so he only net himself 1 Fireball off his Antonidas.
Interesting option. Interesting, definitely interesting, because now he didn't use the Frost Nova. The Frost Nova had the biggest synergy with the Antonidas. Huh. Maybe he was playing around the Greater Healing Potion. Because that Greater Healing Potion could have actually been used as a removal for the Antonidas.
look at Life Coach and Team Germany as they inner fire their 14-14 Acolyte and smash the Ukraine in the face. Childlike glee coming out from Life Coach, as it's been well known to do. But the Alexstrasza pickup now means that Dr. Hippie probably just has to commit at this point. He just saw 1 Shadow Word Death get used, and it was a top deck. And I wonder... I've been talking about that potential read that there was a death in hand the whole time, based on playing Dirty Rat and it pulling nothing. Maybe Dr. Hippie now expects that second Shadow Word Death to be in hand because of Life Coach playing the top deck. But even if he's got that hard read, there is no other minion in your deck that you can get Life Coach to use that Shadow Word Death on. It's going to kill your Alexstrasza regardless.
That is true. But you know what's sad? Even when you play the powerful legendary Dragon Alexstrasza, it's just getting killed by Acolyte of Pain.
Yes.
Without a Shadow Word Death. And Acolyte of Pain still stands and can be healed.
Yes.
So that's quite awkward. So I don't feel there's any other way of winning the game for Dr. Hippie here.
He has 2 Frost Novas, including the one in his hand, and 1 more Blizzard remaining. There might be Primordial Glyphs, so I wonder whether it's ever a plan to just go on the fatigue strategy and try and use that to be the extra damage that you are missing from your deck. And based on that ping on the Acolyte, that does appear to be the case from Dr. Hippie. He's just going to load up this board state here as several small sources of damage that he can send into that Acolyte of Pain and just try and overdraw Life Coach.
I'm just laughing because they actually did draw Elise.
Yeah. It's a very Life Coach card, right? It's a very, very high value card. It's a card that you look at, and if you evaluate cards in the way that Life Coach does, where it's literally just like cold, hard, mathematic value, then Elise is just an incredible card. So no great surprise to see him playing it.
It's also harder to fatigue now on the Priest with Elise being in the deck because of the additional card that is being drawn, and the fact that you just, even when you run out of resources, the 1 booster pack can actually give you multiple minions that can pressure your opponent again.
This jungle hides many secrets.
So Elise is going to come down. There is a Potion of Madness here that can deny this board state, but no matter what they use as their target for the potion, they're going to draw a card themselves anyway. So it actually doesn't do anything to deny themselves from drawing cards. I don't know exactly how many cards Life Coach has left. If we could get a quick read on that, that would be perfect. Because that looks like it's going to come down. That's what this game is going to come down to at this point.
It looks like around 5. Maybe 6. Not exactly sure, but it's definitely deeper in the deck than the Freeze Mage.
Yes. Yeah, it is for sure, yeah.
But Germany knows, like, for some reason, Dr. Hippie and the Ukraine team pinged the Acolyte of Pain.
Yep.
So there's a plan. They are pinging it because they want to overdraw Germany. So now you have to make a counter plan to that, which means you have to be faster.
Yes, exactly. They need to get pressure on very, very soon. That Arcanologist pickup now means that ice barriers will be drawn if they are in the deck from Dr. Hippie, and I expect they are. But those ice barriers are not going to do a great deal of work against a 14-14 and a 5-5 on the board. That will be enough to just push the block pop easily through the 16 total health that ice barrier will have in play. So Dr. Hippie needs to find some way of answering the board state here. Might have to end up fireballing this 5-5 just to protect his ice block for one more turn.
Might be needed. Man, this is such a difficult situation. He goes for the aggressive push. So he just wants to finish up the game in case the priest has no way of healing up.
And that is exactly what Germany wanted to see in this spot. You saw the smiles wipe across all of their faces. They all immediately hunched forward. They know that this game is kicking off now. And this greater healing potion tech, just take a look at Dr. Hippie's face when he sees this card getting played.
Too bad we won't see everyone's face in the Ukraine team right now. I feel like it would be one of those shots from reaction videos when people react to ridiculous stuff.
Yes.
Well, they're still thinking, taking it slow. It's something like a trademark for Life Coach and now for JJ and Kamlan. They all play slow, methodical.
There it is.
Whoops.
And just stunned silence from Dr. Hippie, followed by a confused head shake. No idea what just happened to him that turn. Greater Healing Potion is, yes, Dr. Hippie, a card that they put in their deck on purpose. And right now, it looks like a genius move from Life Coach and Team Germany.
That's such a cool storyline. I love this tournament, man.
It's such a cool story, Bob. That's what we're getting to. Thought that's the point in the day that we'd finally reached.
What? Ice Block is getting popped at 8. Doesn't really matter. That Acolyte of Pain will just kill your opponent at some point in the game. Second Shadow Ward Pain still has its value against the second Doomsay, which is being drawn right now, so it won't really do that much. Dr. Hippie has to be aware. 2 Flame Strike, by the way.
2 Flame Strikes, wow.
It's like a very similar situation where we witnessed RDU playing double Flame Strike in his Tempo Mage.
Yes.
Like, wait, what?
Right.
But still, for Dr. Hippie and Ukraine does... I don't want to be like, you know, just calling a game right now, but it doesn't look great.
It doesn't. So let's try and find a win condition for Dr. Hippie. Flame Strike Ice Barrier this turn keeps him alive without having to give up another Ice Block. Although it looks like he is going to go with the block here. This confuses me because you're in a really bad spot here, so you do need to take some risks. Obviously, Holy Nova would have killed him if he played Barrier in this spot, but I think you're in such a terrible position that it feels like the risk of the Ice Barrier might have been necessary just to squeeze out that one extra turn.
That is true. I'm kind of confused about that as well.
I mean, far be it from me to question Dr. Hippie's Freeze Mage play, especially when he's supported by the likes of Nyria and Kalento and Nick Chipper, who are fantastic players in their own right. But Dr. Hippie, even individually, is one of the very best Freeze Mage players in the world. But it seems to me like the risk needed to be taken in that spot.
Nyria is a no slouch himself. Like, he is being known for playing Freeze Mages for ages now.
Yes.
It's kind of funny. He's in a team with Liquid, but he's playing Freeze Mage.
Ah, there we go. A water-based states joke there from Lothar.
All right, what are the cards? Vine Cleaver, the New York Tortillon Primalist.
Yep. Frozen Crusher, a.k.a. Standardachi, and Stubborn Gastropod.
The Gastropod is one of the most cute cards in this expansion. It's just such a ridiculous card. Look at it, I feel.
Look at the role-playing with Vine Cleavers. This is a bunch of grown men just pretending to swing around weapons like they're 5. These guys, honestly.
All right, well, what can you say about this game? The Acolyte of Pain was being played on turn 3. And it's alive for the entire game.
Ooh. Doesn't have enough, though. With the Frost Nova, didn't have enough mana to generate that Ice Barrier. Would have ended up dying if he'd have played the Ice Barrier the previous turn anyway because of that Vine Cleaver. Also would have been dead to just about anything. You know, Holy Nova from hand would have killed him. But maybe that was a risk that needed taking. It wouldn't have had any impact on the game as a whole. But what a game it was. Absolute marathon. Second game of the series there. And unbelievably, that is only now 1-1 in this series. And Germany have squared it up.
Is it unbelievable? I mean, it's live coach and I one team, so
Fair point.
not really a surprise right now. He's
take it
being
back.
known for roping, although when you think about it, I think Ukraine was actually taking more time.
I think they were too, yeah. I think if we had an average turn timer, then I think it came down to the fact that, like, yes, life coach is a slow player, but they kind of had the game spelled out in front of them the whole time. You made this point during the game. They knew they had greater healing potion in their hand. They knew they had this huge threatening Acolyte of Pain on the board, so their plays were quite straightforward. They just made sure they covered all their bases, then they made their turn. Whereas every single turn, it was Dr. Hippie and the Ukraine had to scramble for some kind of win condition in that matchup, so they were roping out every single turn. But personally, I will be happy if we get to see games like that over and over again in every series we ever play. They're a joy for me to cast, and I personally am happy that at least for now it looks like Freeze Mage is continuing to hang around in the metagame.
Definitely true, because it adds additional layer to the Mage class. Now it has a relevant aggro deck, relevant control deck, relevant combo deck.
Right.
It's all, diversity is cool.
Yes, it is. Can't argue with that. Just like the diversity of this 48-country Hearthstone tournament that we are playing out, and now it's going to be Super JJ representing Germany up against Nick Chipper, the Hunter God from the Ukraine. And unsurprisingly, he has elected to take control of the Hunter for his team, although he hasn't yet picked it for this game. We will find out right now. Was there any ever doubt? He is picking the Hunter, and it's going to go up against Warlock from Super JJ. And now Super JJ, in the Throne of Cards tournament that happened recently, was running that Sifka Warlock with all the healing and the Blood Bloom Doom combination.
It was a ridiculous deck to watch yesterday, actually.
Yes.
A very characteristic game at the same time, with double Jaraxuses and a sacrificial pact in his opponent's hand, and yet he won.
Right.
With the Jaraxus actually dealing the final blow. So if we're gonna see this deck again, it will be a joy to watch. It's a very different deck. It feels like a, you know what, I'm gonna put Warlock in my decks and press out to fill.
It does feel a lot like that, yeah. It's like the early days of Reno Mage. Like the very first 1 or 2 builds that I saw of Reno Mage didn't really seem to have any like coherent plan going on whatsoever. It was just Reno, Kazakus, autofill 28 cards. Yeah. That kind of feels like what this deck is, but it can make some absolutely insane things happen between, Blood Bloom, Doom, Twisting Nether, and then Medivh thrown in on top of all of that as well, which still gets full value even if you Blood Bloom the spell out, because you're still paying 8 something for it. It's just not health. It's just not mana, it's health instead. So, well, I mean, I hope that's what we see, because I want to see creative decks being played, but maybe JJ has gone with something a little bit more consistent here. But as I said before, Life Coach did say that the decks they were playing in Throne of Cards may be very similar to the decks that end up getting played here.
Hopefully that's the case. Now we can see some facts about Super JJ. Has 4 career major tournament wins and 10 appearances in the top 4 in major events. He actually had a sick winning streak in 2016.
He did, yes. Really put himself on the map after signing with Complexity, starting at Seat Story Cup and then running through from there. But as we've mentioned several times, Nick Chipper, as well as being a member of Team Spirit alongside all those powerhouses on the Russian team, he's also well known for innovating Hunter decks and is always looked to by pro players for their new Hunter deck lists. And just out of the corner of my eye, I can see Raven just trying to contain his excitement just off to the right-hand side of the camera.
Thank you, DJ, for that comment.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see maybe a new Hunter list from Nick Chipper here.
He has been posting quite a few lists on Twitter, so I wonder if he has held anything back or whether he's laid it all on the table on Twitter so far. But as we mentioned, absolute Hunter God, one of the long-time players, one of the very last players to give up on Hunter on the previous expansion when it was absolutely unplayable. He tried his very best to make it happen. And I don't know about this deck from JJ. It could be double Siphon Soul.
It might be that deck. I don't know. If we'll see a Voodoo Doctor in the opening hand, then yes, it will be. That's an additional card that says, yeah, get me out of that garbage bin, man. I'm gonna play now.
Double Mistress of Mixtures and a Soulfire as well. It's starting to line up like it might be that insane healing deck. Oh. There is the Voodoo Doctor. This is Blood Bloom Doom Warlock from Super JJ, keeping faith with that deck here. But he has just picked up a really strong early game curve of minions, which is not really what this deck does best. But if you draw double Mistress of Mixtures, you're probably in pretty good shape in a lot of games.
Well, what you have to say about this deck is that it doesn't really have that much healing when you compare it to Reno Jackson. Or at least maybe say it like that. Reno Jackson decks had access to insane burst heal.
Yes.
While this deck has access to just cards that will just give you 4 heal, 2 heal, 3 heal, and then some. But that's about it.
Right. And crucially, Reno decks only had to draw their 1 Reno, and then they got all of that healing done at once. Whereas to make up anywhere near that same amount of healing, you have to draw a Voodoo Doctor and a Farseer and a Siphon Soul and a Mistress of Mixtures. It's just much more unlikely to happen to add up to that amount. And forced to Soulfire the huge threat of the Scavenging Hyena early on means that Super JJ is down to be very low on resources early on, but he does keep the Tar Creeper, which was massively important, as that's what he's trying to curve out with now.
That is definitely correct. Now it's the question. This is a tough situation. We talked about it extensively with the Red Pack. It comes down to turn 4. We didn't see a single Houndmaster yet, of course, because it's turn 3, but also Crackling Reservoir is an option. So if you let the Red Pack alive, it can get insane value. But if you trade with the Mistress of Mixtures right now, you deny yourself the health bonus that you can get after some life taps. And life taps will be important because you just lost card advantage by playing Soulfire on that Hyena. So you need to get back into the game as soon as possible, since this deck has actually lower quality of cards than the typical Reno Warlock as in the past.
And a much lower quality of cards than your Hunter opponent. If this comes down to just a battle for the board, the Hunter is going to crush you. This deck needs to do silly things in terms of just drawing 7 or 8 cards with Doom and just blowing the game out with just overwhelming amount of resources. So JJ can't hang around too long here, and this trade decision is huge, as well as whether or not he wants to coin out that Mortal Coil. Chooses not to. Looks like the tea and or coffee has been delivered, and they are ready to settle in for another dose of teamwork here to help JJ through.
Now Crackling Reservoir goes down. +3 attack is being picked, which can deal with the Tar Creeper instantly. Now we can witness the power of the adaptation in this situation. Red Pack into adaptation dealt with 2 cards.
Nick Chipper, obviously talking to his teammates on comms right now, just threw up his hands and went, yeah, I mean, of course I got +3 attack there. That's why I play Hunter. I just nailed it. Easy, every time.
Well, it could have been also poisonous.
Yes, absolutely.
It would have been even a better outcome.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course it would have been. I'm not going to be pedantic enough to argue that it would, but you know, this Mortal Coil would have just sniped out one of the 1/1s that was or the 1/1 that was remaining. So when it all shakes up, it actually would have weirdly worked out a little bit better for Super JJ. But of course, your statement is correct in theory. Poisonous would have been even stronger.
Bloodbloom already being drawn, but no spells in the hand as at all. You need to get the Doom as fast as possible, because Hunter will just overwhelm you right now, especially with cards that have almost insane value when it comes to the card quality. So cards like Infested Wolf, 7 High Main.
Yes.
I'm not sure if Nick Chipper will be playing Hydra.
I'm not sure. I will look over to Raven and ask the question of whether Nick Chipper is playing Bittertide Hydra in his most recently played Hunter decks. He is shaking his head. So apparently the decks that he's been posting on Twitter at least have not featured Hydra.
Interesting choice. I mean, it's a great card.
It's really, really strong. I've loved it when I've been playing Hunter. It's been incredibly powerful to me, but so many potential mid-game options. Back in the day, that 5-mana slot was very, very hard to fill in Hunter. There just didn't really feel like there was a good card to go there. Stranglethorn Tiger, best of a bad bunch a lot of the time. Now you've got Nesting Rocks, you've got Bittertide Hydra, you've got extra value from Tundra Rhino that makes that a real consideration now as well. So suddenly the 5-mana turn is actually one of Hunter's strongest turns these days, which is a bizarre reversal of roles.
And also every single 5-drop is a card that needs to be just instantly removed when you think about it. Even a Thunder Rhino, it's a 2/5 minion, but if it doesn't get removed, you might just die next turn.
If it doesn't get removed, then you get slapped in the face by a Savannah High Main the next turn.
All right, well, now we can witness the card quality of that Warlock deck. Voidwalker, tap. Twilight Drake being drawn. Not really the best since you need to coin it out. Then it's only a 4-5 minion, so basically a Yeti. But it is needed on the board right now because otherwise you're getting too much damage.
Festive Wolf number 2 being picked up here, making this board state so sticky for Nick Chipper in the Ukraine. He can push 10 damage this turn alongside it and then threaten an Animal Companion the turn after for a massive Leok buff, meaning Leok and Huffer will both represent huge amounts of damage the next turn if his board state isn't dealt with.
Yeah, it doesn't look promising for Germany here. The board, as you said, is really sticky and has a lot of survival options. So even a Shadow Flame here doesn't really do much. Farseer, another card that just heals you for a little bit.
Yes.
And that's about it. But it is needed right now. What it can be considered from JJ is that you can tap Blood Bloom into nothing because then you can't heal. Oh.
It's also a weird situation and kind of a unique situation against Hunter where, you know, you could trade and then heal up your Twilight Drake and then taunt the 2 minions because health on your Twilight Drake is essentially the same as health on your face when you're taunting it. Against Hunter, that isn't the case because it just means that's less times that they just have to survive and press hero power each turn if you don't heal up the minion. So it's actually a tough decision as to what to do here. Even alongside Farseer and Sun Fury, he has Voidwalker to drop down as well, but he might even be valuing the life tap just to get himself towards Twisting Nether, Doom, which wouldn't be playable in this situation with Blood Bloom, just purely for the amount of damage it would cost him, but will be necessary in the next turn or two just to be able to deal with some board states if this one push here is not big enough to get them a grip on the board.
And still, even a Twisting Nether might be problematic because those 2 wolves might still be alive, or at least one. And then you have still 2 small minions that can just attack your face and deal that small chip damage that will finish off the game. Especially now that the only heal cards that are being played in that Warlock, if I'm not mistaken, are Voodoo Doctors, Mistress of Mixtures, and we have seen those already.
Yes, both of them, yep.
Farseers, and we have seen one. Siphon Soul and Jaraxxus.
Yes, correct. I believe that is it.
So not a lot of options, and Jaraxxus cannot be played for upcoming 3 turns. Sorry, 2 turns.
Is he choosing to hold the Animal Companion here? That's very interesting to me. Choosing to hold the Animal Companion just so he can squeeze in that hero power. Did not want to commit fully to board, just wanted to push that extra damage through. It does make sense if you dig down into it. We've just ourselves said that there is a ton of the healing already been used. So Nick Chipper might just see this game as completely linear from this position and say, all I have to do is press this hero power a few more times and I end the game. Animal Companion Huffer will end the game right now. Jewel McCaw can potentially pick up a Charge Beast as well. Clutch Mother Zavas is not going to get it done. And neither is that Misha, which means Super JJ has 1 more turn now to find some sort of answer to this board state. But I cannot imagine one card that gets him out of this. Siphon Soul?
I can imagine one, but it's in the wild.
Siphon Soul gets him up to 4, and then he gets to trade 2 off the board. So yes, Siphon would have done it, but that was the only thing. And this deck is going to bite the dust here, despite getting the very best possible start, really. Double Mistress of Mixtures and the Soulfire that didn't discard his Tar Creeper. Let him just curve out perfectly from turns 1 to 3.
But what we witness is the fact that the Mistress of Mixtures were just played as a 1-mana minion that didn't do anything else apart from trading. So the heal was not relevant, while we witnessed the other side of the coin for the Hunter. So Beasts had additional effect because of the adaptation. Rat Pack had its effect being played as well. So the grind was real. Every single additional bonus from a Hunter minion was just reforged into damage later on. And that small damage was just piling on, without an access to burst heal from the Warlock just resulted in a loss.
And it feels like Hunter just is the natural predator of that deck, really, because even if those big Blood Bloom AoE options did line up together, Hunter is kind of the one class that has really resilient, sticky Death Rattle minions left over, right? So they have the opportunity to resist that. It did pan out that way. Nick Chipper is winning with his Hunter. No great surprise, one of the big aficionados of that deck. A smile is on the face of all the people watching this supporting Ukraine, but the biggest smile in the room is on the face of Raven, who got to see Hunter win.
Definitely true. Now, Ukraine is on match point. 2-1 against Germany. A lot of people were actually pointing out to Germany being the pretender to win this game, but looks like Ukraine is taken by the horns.
Yeah, I mean, let's not sell Ukraine short. I think maybe Germany was a slight favorite if you wanted to really boil this down, but the Ukraine team is still one of the biggest teams in this tournament. Dr. Hippie, world runner-up. Kalento, just a massive number of major tournament wins under his belt. Nyria, one of the longest surviving players to still be, top-level relevancy in the Hearthstone scene. He was there early on, and he got right back there again in the Bahamas event recently. And then, of course, Nick Chipper. Perhaps, if you want to pick out a weak link of the Ukraine team, he's the one that doesn't have the pedigree to stack up against the rest of them. But the man knows how to play some Hunter, and sometimes that's all it takes.
That is true. I mean, my favorite pick from the tournament, so I'm kind of happy.
There you go.
Although, on the other side, there's life coach on the team, my teammates, I'm unhappy that he's losing. But it's balanced right now. And now, for the fourth match of the day between Germany and Ukraine, we'll have a newer player from Germany, Viper.
Yes.
21 years old, if I'm not mistaken, and a mathematician by education. He's also, he was playing in, was that ACT Summer Preliminaries, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, I think that's right, yeah.
But he had no bigger events behind his belt yet.
No, but behind the scenes, he's been plugging away, picking up very impressive results. But obviously, there are only a certain amount of tournaments that you get exposure to, especially if you're a more casual viewer, which means there are some names in this tournament that you won't recognize as top players. But although there are some celebrity picks on these teams, players that have been voted on because they're big content creators, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, Viper is not one of those. He is a competitive player that has found his way onto this team through his reputation as a competitive player.
Yeah, he basically got on this team because of his mass points for HCT.
Right. Yeah.
So he's the merit player.
There you go. And Nyria is going to be his opponent. The matchup is going to be Shaman from Nyria up against Warrior from Viper, I believe. So we've seen this matchup play out once today already if it ends up being Elemental Shaman versus Taunt Warrior, as now we can learn just a little bit more about these players. 37 HCT points in 2016, which is only good enough for 10th in Germany. Not 10th in the world, 10th in Germany. That goes to show you when you are picking a team of 4 players to represent Germany, that's how deep the talent pool goes.
That's kind of insane. We actually talked about it yesterday. Just Germany, Czech Republic have an insanely built community in games in general.
Sorry. Nyria's favorite national dish is buckwheat porridge, which is a porridge usually made from buckwheat. Thanks, TJ. Cool story.
Wow, it's interesting.
Back to Hearthstone. Shaman up against Warrior. And it's going to be the Elemental Shaman based on the fact there is a Hot Spring Guardian, but the rest of this does not scream Elemental Shaman to me because there is Doomsayer, Dirty Rat, Ysera in this deck from Nyria. So maybe this is just a pure and simple control Shaman.
It is a control Shaman. It probably plays Volcanoes as well. It's a new iteration of the old control Shamans that we have seen in the past playing, Ancestral Recalls, Ancestral Spirits, one of my favorite archetypes in general. Now I have to see what did Ukraine actually bring to the table, because this is something we didn't really see that often in the past days.
I have not seen a successful control Shaman list at all, and there are 2 Earth Elementals being packed in this deck. Viper will have no idea what's about to hit him this game, I'm sure. And we'll have to see how successful this is, because, if there are high-quality minions like Earth Elemental in this deck for Nyria and for Ukraine, that can be very effective at pushing through all these, stat-inefficient taunts that Warrior will be playing over the course of the game.
Definitely true. It might just be... The Earth Elemental might just take 3 for 1, especially with healing totems, or the Hot Spring Guardian, which is able to heal minions.
Yes.
It's like a Farseer, but different.
Yes.
It's an elemental.
Yeah, Hot Spring Guardian is another really powerful card that was maybe overlooked a little bit. Just
my
coming
top
out.
5.
Okay, nicely done. 2-4, arguably a better stat line than 3-3, especially when you're in a class that has Flame Tongue Totem. And then the ability for it to be an elemental proc on top of that and being a taunt makes it so much more of a powerful late game minion than Earthen Ring Farseer is, as well as more powerful in the early game because of Flame Tongue Totem and because it starts your elemental chain.
Definitely true. That's a cool card. It actually enables, in my opinion, a slower archetype for the elementals. You know what's funny? Neria can actually play Dirty Rat with Doomsayer on turn 3.
I honestly wouldn't have hated to see the Dirty Rat there. Yes, you can pull out some pretty big taunts from your warrior opponent, but first and foremost, if you rat out a taunt, that doesn't proc their quest for them. So that's one extra card they have to draw eventually to proc that quest. Secondly, this is the big value card in Warrior's deck. This Stonehill Guardian coming down right here. Options are Sunwalker, Lord of the Arena, Rathion, by the way. So since that is the card that they will be likely playing on turn 3, this is your best opportunity to rat that thing out of the hand and deny them a ton of value.
Well, Rathion is actually pretty decent. There are 2 or 3 dragons.
At least 2 normally, yeah. At least Primordial Drake, either 2 Primordial Drakes or 1 Drake plus Deathwing, or 2 Drakes plus Deathwing is usually what you see being played.
This is why you play Curator in this deck as well, because you have Beast taunts in the deck, and you have a dragon as well. So usually the Curator will at least give you 1 card, maybe 2, which is insane when it comes to like what the deck wants to achieve, because you need Juice, and Juice will be taunt minion with another taunt minion on top. So it's exactly like Stonehill Defender here. But for Neria, what do you want to play here? Now you know that there might be a high-value minion out of the Stonehill.
Yes.
So the Dirty Rat doesn't really look that appealing anymore.
It does. So if you were to do Dirty Rat Coin Doomsayer here, say you even pulled out a large, say a 3/6 taunt, that's one of the biggest taunts that they'll play. You're still fairly well protected, right, with that Dirty Rat blocking off the Doomsayer. So even in the worst case scenario where it's a Tar Lord or a Direhorn Hatchling or any of the bigger taunts in the deck, I think it's secure enough behind this Dirty Rat that it still makes it a pretty strong play.
Definitely correct. The only downside of this might be an Execute, but at the same time, if you're gonna see an Execute on a Doomsayer, it's not that bad. It means the Elf Elemental might have a safe passage to the board, and that will be crucial, because that Elf Elemental will give you very good value when paired up against those, well, pesky but low attack taunt minions from the Warrior.
It's also worth noting that, of course, we've switched scenes here, and Viper is the man playing Forever Alone and having to communicate with the other 3 guys all having a good time in one collected place over comms. He is, of course, still getting the full support, and he would have been having input into the plays of the other 3 guys playing together. He is the odd man out, probably lives a little bit further away than JJ and Camlan do from Life Coach, but still obviously relying and benefiting from the input of those 3 massively experienced players.
Well, actually, Germany plays from Austria.
That's very true, of course, yeah. Life Coach actually lives in Austria, spoilers. And so does JJ as of recently. I think he moved in specifically to be closer to Life Coach so they could get their big boot camp practice schedule on.
What a love story, man.
Yeah. Name me a more iconic duo. I'll wait.
Barnes and Madame Goya.
All right, I was not expecting that to be the response. Of all the potential things, you go Barnes, Madame Goya.
Yeah, it's just from my own experience, man.
Yes. R.I.P. Goya Shaman.
I love the deck, though.
Yes.
So, I have to try it in new expansion. Maybe it will be a little bit playable. We'll see. Anyway, Jinju, Water Speaker, is one of the cards that is replacing cards like Healing Wave. It's a little bit of healing. It's the same thing as we just talked about the Warlock. They lost the big burst cards when it comes to healing, so they need to find other ways. And in this case, it will be the Hot Spring Guardian, the Jinju, and the new card from the new expansion, Tidal Surge, which deals 4 damage, heals for 4. Unfortunately, it doesn't pair up symmetrically with spell damage. So it only deals 5 damage with spell damage, but it doesn't heal for 5.
That's why it's important that spell damage in Hearthstone is spell damage, it's not spell power, because it has no effect on healing But yeah, Hot Spring Guardian being used here for that process that you named earlier, which is just getting extra value out of your minions. No real decision, like I talked about earlier, do I attack into this Tar minion or don't I? Is it better to just leave it there? No decision there for Nyria whatsoever, because he can just immediately heal back up the lost value by trading into it.
Just don't touch it. It stinks.
It does look like it smells pretty terrible.
It has some bones in it, right?
Yes.
Has to stink. Yeah, but the other card, value card in the Shaman deck, one of my beloved ones, White Eyes, which was completely insane with Ancestral Spirit. Nowadays, we'll not see that. But you think they might be actually playing the new Shaman spell that gives Death Rattle at the card?
Spirit Echo, right?
Spirit Echo,
Yeah.
yes. It's 3 mana epic. Might actually like kind of feel like it fits. It's like a mass Ancestral Spirit, but it doesn't summon the minions on the board at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, up against this matchup, very, very effective resource generation because, you know, no silence effects, no transform effects are going to be found in a Taunt Warrior, which means if he can stick a board and then get that to come down, he is going to get a massive boost of resources back into his hand afterwards.
Another Hot Spring Guardian.
Thinking about it, it does synergize very well with all of these small healing minions that he has in here as well. The Jinyus and the Hot Spring Guardians. If you then buff those up, that's very, very effective against aggro. It turns what would normally be a very bad card against aggro into a very reasonable one if you can get a small taunt that heals you down onto the board over and over again. So the more I look at this deck, I think that might be a good call, Lothar. We might actually see some Spirit Echo action coming out of this over the next few turns.
Would love to see that because actually, it's super cool to see all those creative decks right now. It's fresh into the expansion. We have 48 teams with 4 players each. With that amount of players, someone has some different ideas.
Yes. 100%. And we've already seen 1 or 2 of them. Of course, the previous game being the go-to straight away, that greater healing potion tech, all of the burst healing being piled into that priest deck, working out perfectly for Life Coach and Team Germany. But now Ukraine is back with some weird choices of their own now. And Nyria really is kind of famous for this, of kind of looking at the game in his own way. He has been notorious for bringing some kind of weird stuff to tournaments in the past, and looks like there is no change just yet, as it's a full-blown control Shaman coming out here. But in theory, it's a well-positioned deck in this matchup, just purely based on the amount of value he's going to be able to generate.
They just have to kind of watch out for Brawl.
Yes.
It's one of the cards that can blow them out of the water, because of just pure value it will generate.
For sure. Lightning Storm pickup, though, not hugely useful, but it does answer the board relatively well. It just doesn't get to develop particularly well behind it. He can use Hot Spring number 2 to heal up the Jinyu yet again afterwards, but it looks to me like Tidal Surge does the job just a little bit better here.
Lightning Storm and Tidal Surge is actually, I think, a good answer, because you still put some pressure on the warrior. You require an answer for the next turn from the warrior. The only downside of this play is that you don't have a swift answer to the next taunt minion.
Right.
No hex, no damage dealing card. So you need to trade those 2 minions that you have on your board, and that's only 5 damage. So maybe it's just better to develop something on the board this turn and just wait it out. But that brings the problem that you just overplay into a brawl.
It is very fast getting to the point now, though, where Nyria needs to get some bigger threats down on the board. He can't hang around forever. This isn't a deck that you can just straight out value as Quest Warrior, because that Sulfuras hero power just completely breaks the rules of a value engine in terms of how many resources it can provide for you, as well as how quickly it ends the game, right? If it's hitting minions, then you're going to outvalue your opponent. If it's hitting face, it's just going to end the game. So a long game against Sulfuras is not looking too promising, and I believe he's all the way to 5 already with all of the resources he needs to finish the quest in hand. So this is not looking like a game where Nyria has too much time to hang around. Probably just needs to start developing as much pressure as he can on the board.
Well, he will lose the value game 100% unless he actually plays the Spirit Echo.
Yes.
It's not looking great for them. Not looking good for Ukraine, although it's still 2-1 for them. So losing this game is not completely terrible. Still for us when it comes to like card evaluation, I think I was the only person in my own like circles that actually said that the Taunt Warriors quest is insane. It's completely insane. And RDU said, nah.
Because what kind of crazy people do you have in your circle?
Well, we were evaluating with Dejo and RDU on stream actually.
Okay.
And we were like, I was saying, the quest for Warriors just seems OP. It's just insane value. It just generates itself because you play Taunt minions and you want to do that anyway.
Yes. And the deck continues to surprise me. There are so many matchups where I feel like the opposing deck should have the right combination of value and pressure to be able to beat this kind of deck. And then I try it out, or I see it being played on tournament, or I spectate someone else playing that matchup. It just seems like Taunt Warrior just always finds a way. It's a real contender for the #1 deck in this format right now, and the deck to beat in Hearthstone.
It's also it also resembles a Druid deck. It's kind of like I play a curve minion, play another curve minion. Play another curve minion, most likely they will outvalue our minions, and suddenly I'll just finish the game.
And then, surprise, I kill you!
Yeah, exactly, right? No Savage Roar, but in this case, there's just a huge hero power.
Yes. Sleep with the Fishes coming out here, just preemptively allowing him to trade through this this Earth Elemental, but just leaving the 4-1 hanging around on the board. Ali Armorsmith comes down to follow up, and based on the struggle that Viper and Germany had dealing with that first Elemental, it looks like second Earth Elemental is a pretty appealing prospect right now.
Seems exactly like the case, especially that it pairs super efficiently against the Ali Armorsmith with the 7 attack that it has.
That Ali Armorsmith was taunt number 6 for Viper for Germany, so that means that the next minion that gets played gives the potential for that Sulfuras hero power to come out, and to prevent that, recognizing that exact situation, Nyria is going to go for the Doomsayer here instead.
Little does he know, there's a second Stonehill defender who will achieve that.
Yes.
And will not be a huge loss to the warrior. So he still generates value from its battle cry, and you actually have time to develop the hammer and use the hero power. So it might be the case that the Doomsayer actually dies.
Correct.
And you still have the board.
He doesn't have enough, right? He does, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sulfuras and hero power. I get fixated on quest costing 5, whereas Sulfuras is like unique in the fact that it's a 3-mana weapon.
Well, when you think about it, it's actually 5 because you need to use the hero power to get value out of it.
Yes, I understand like why they've done it that way. It just always like gets stuck in my brain that you have to spend 5 mana to activate it in the first place. But of course, you do not. So that play is available to Viper this turn if he wants to go down that line. And if he does, I wonder whether you attack the 1-1 with the weapon or not.
I think I would actually. It increases the chances of your minion just, you know, surviving by a lot. Unfortunately, not the case here.
Rip. So he is going to lose the board, but he is still setting up a very strong lethal possibility for himself over the next couple of turns. Just 12 damage already from the weapon and the hero power if that's allowed to connect with face. Nyria does have a big taunt wall of his own that he can start putting up, but there's card advantage for Viper already, there's health advantage, and he's just going to be able to deal with whatever's played here relatively easily, you'd have to imagine, if as long as he gets a decent shot with the hero power.
Doesn't look really great for Ukraine. It was actually looking great in the beginning. Like in my mind when I was like just playing the matchup in Fury, it looked like the Shaman might be actually tailored to win matchups like that. But after the quest is just being done, suddenly the coin just flips on the other side and it doesn't look great anymore. Now the Earth Elemental is really weak when you compare it to the hero power. It deals exactly 8.
Not a great looking spot for the Ukraine here, and Viper, this might be a slow march. It might take a couple of turns if the hero powers don't cooperate, but it seems like we are inevitably marching towards a 2-2 tied series here, unless there are some real tricks in Nyria's deck somewhere that he needs to pick up very, very quickly.
So what can he do? What can he play in his deck?
I have no idea.
Here's Isera as the late game.
We saw that in the Mulligan.
I'm thinking, but maybe Deathwing?
Deathwing is a possibility, but then there is no hard removal in hand for Viper. There is the Brawl if things get particularly desperate, so maybe that is a possibility. Isera itself as well is at least a 4-12, so it has the opportunity to resist the board position, but this is just clearing out that thing from below and now setting up lethal for the following turn with that hero power. Has Fiery War Axe to push damage with next turn as well. This is not looking pretty, and there is still a good chunk of healing for Nyria, but he needs a lot more than healing to get him out of this mess right now.
The Volcano will clear the board, that's true. That's actually the cool aspect of the Volcano. It's built to, it's tailored against high health minions like that.
Yes.
In example, the old Elemental Destruction was built to destroy multiple minions with high health, but it couldn't destroy one target with higher health than 5. In this case, Volcano can actually do both, but as a cost, you have an RNG and random effect built in.
Most often you're looking to use it in situations where there is just less than 15 health total on the board though, so you end up clearing the whole thing. And that is going to be the most common usage that you do see from the card if we end up seeing it a decent amount over the next couple of months, which I have my reservations about, let's put it that way. I don't know whether Control Shaman will end up being the way to go. Nyria believes differently though. He felt like this was the deck to go with, at least for this tournament. Not working out too great for him so far, of course. Sample size of 1. Let's not draw any conclusions just yet. But Nyria, again, needs an absolute miracle from the top of his deck this turn.
Raffian just drawing 1 card. Armor Smith, okay, that's something that I didn't anticipate. A lot of Taunt Warriors actually not playing Armor Smith because it doesn't build up anything towards the quest. And just seems low value. Against most aggressive decks anyway.
Nyria just decides to show us all the Volcano animation in case you haven't seen it before. There you go. It is rather pretty, but not going to get him out of that situation. Viper and Germany are going to tie this series up 2-2. And how fitting, Lothar, that this clash between two of the strongest teams we've seen enter the fray so far is going to go all the way down to the ace match, the 5th game.
The 5th game, and who was the ace player? It was JJ versus Colento.
I believe so, yes.
2 star players that we'll see battling against each other with one of the classes that they didn't use in the tournament, but they also bring the 9th class right now, because the ace player has a wider access.
Right. The ace player gets to add the 3rd class that no one else chose for their 2-class lineup to their lineup, and then if they get to play the ace game, they have 2 classes remaining that they can choose from. They can't repeat the same deck they've already played. They can pick either of those other 2 classes.
Exactly. So it might be something completely new.
It would, but what a fantastic marquee game to finish off this series, potentially. I mean, any of these players matching up against each other would have been fantastic, but it's going to be Super JJ Shaman up against Colento Paladin. And Colento putting himself in the ace match with the Paladin does not surprise me, because this is a deck I have seen him not only on his own stream in Top 20 Legend with, but queuing into pretty sure every other player I've watched recently who's been at High Legend have played Colento at some point while playing Paladin.
Interesting. I mean, I played his list actually as well, just to get it rolling and see how the matchups are being played out.
Sure.
It's an interesting deck because there's a lot of synergy. One of the new cards, Tarim,
yes,
has a lot of synergy with the deck as well. There's Vine Cleaver in the deck to create additional 1/1s. Lost in the Jungle, Nesting Rock, all have synergy with a wider board. In this case, Tarim is also great against aggressive decks because it actually stops the minions. They might be bigger than 3/3, but then suddenly they are shrunk.
Yes.
And Tarim has 3 attacks, 7 health, so he requires actually more than 2 attacks.
And there's actually multiple builds that Colento's been playing and been successful with as well. There's the kind of pure mid-rangey, control-ish Paladin that you're talking about. There's also a Handbuff elemental-style Paladin that he's done relatively well with as well. I think early on he was more messing around with that, and he's moved towards the mid-range. But again, crucial point is, when exactly did the deck submission for this tournament line up with what he felt was the strongest Paladin deck? So really interesting as to what we're going to see from him, but not surprising in the long run that it is Colento on the ace match, because incredibly accomplished player, and not surprising to me at all that he's electing to bet the entire series on Paladin. And how many times over the past 4 or 5 months have we said those words, Lothar?
I can't remember a single one.
Since maybe the G2 sweep in the opening week of Trinity Series, that was Paladin's one moment in the sun where we all thought maybe with a Shaman ban, with a Warrior ban, it's a good deck. No,
well, something
no, it still wasn't.
Anything can happen.
There you go.
I mean, happened back then.
Anything did happen. Yeah.
Exactly. But now, which is interesting, you're talking about the Handbuff Paladin. Okay, it's not that. Actually, it is. Grime Street Enforcer. So the one card that actually allows that to be played competitively, in my opinion, is Firefly.
Right.
Because of the aspect that it just plays a card,
Yes.
gives you a card, it can still be buffed.
Okay, and this right here, this is why Kalento believes this deck is powerful. He draws Smuggler's Run every single game on turn 1, I
It's
swear.
like Wild Grove.
I've watched such a good chunk of him playing this deck, again, on his own stream and him queuing into other streamers while I've been watching them. Every single time, I swear, Smuggler's Run, turn 1.
Well, it can also be Grime Street Enforcer. Sorry, the 2-mana.
Yeah, that's right.
That was Grime Street
I think
Enforcer?
so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Grime Street Informant is the 2/4, and Enforcer is the 1/1, I believe.
Right, so it's either Smuggler's Run or the other one that you need
The
to
other
have
guy, yeah.
in the opening hand to just generate that value. The problem is you don't want to actually start first because you want to have more cards that can be buffed.
Correct.
And you also don't want to see Trucifer Champion in your opening hand at all.
No. It's a card that if you're going to need to play in the early game, you would ideally rather draw it on turn 3 or turn 4 so that you can dodge having it be one of the cards in your hand to buff with the hand buff effects. But Kalento's hand a little bit slow right now. You know, it might be selling him a bit short here. Yes, he did pick up that turn 1 Smuggler's Run, but he hasn't got anything particularly impactful to buff with it for a few turns. And take a look at these cheesy guys in your top left. They have changed into what looks like German national football shirts for this final game.
Why didn't do that before?
Well, it's all on the line now. They need to make this 5th game feel special.
All right, but it actually looks cool.
What a bunch of role players. Jeez.
Are they swinging in the swords yet? No, not yet. Right. There are no weapons yet in their hands, so that's probably why.
There you go.
But when it comes to the quality of their hand, is actually way higher. Especially in this matchup. Foul Nose, Mouse and Portal Lightning Storm is something that can give them insane value against an elemental deck that has to go wide on the board. Especially with the version of the hand buff. Now they know. It's like, yeah.
It's simply hand buff. Igneous Elemental being picked up, though, does give him a turn 3 play. That was important. You saw Kalento deliberately hold back, not playing the Smuggler's Run on turn 1 because it wasn't good value for him. Now he picked up the Igneous Elemental, which goes back to that Firefly point you were making. This is another great card for a hand buff deck because of the Flame Elementals that it puts into your hand. But since he picked that card up, he can now play that essentially as a Spider Tank, as a 3/4 on the following turn, with still the extra Death Rattle value, and now his 3/4/5 curve actually looks pretty strong.
Yeah, it actually looks decent. When you compare the Smuggler's Run with other cards, you can actually think about Mark of the Lotus, but it doesn't work on board. It just does work on your hand. But it's very similar in this aspect, right? You just can't get, you just don't get the immediate value out of, like, let's say, charge minions or already minions that were played previous turn, so you don't get the attack immediately. But it's easier to buff your minions in hand, since you're not required to actually pay the mana first.
So coining out the Tar Creeper here is Super JJ. This is not a play that I've seen too much. Coining this minion out is often a little bit weak because it doesn't actually represent good tempo for you. Like, you want to turn your coin turn into tempo. That's usually what you want to use the coin for. That's your big advantage, that you get to reverse the flow of the game when you're going second. So essentially you've just coined a 1/5 that turn, which now starts to look a lot more promising alongside the second Tar Creeper, but preemptively with only the Hot Spring Guardian as a follow-up didn't look that strong.
With the Hot Spring Guardian, I guess the logic behind that was that they want to attack into something that, even with the one attack, and then heal it up back.
Sure.
Because you have some value and you didn't have any other free drop, so they would have to play the Hot Spring Guardian. So why not take advantage of its battle cry and squeeze one more point of damage, which might be relevant for the Malice and Portal or Lightning Storm in the future.
Yeah, makes sense. I can definitely see it when you look at it that way, but now picking up the second Tar Creeper, I think this is just a stronger play overall, so no great surprise to see this coming out. Just making use of that fortunate draw on that occasion, and now the curve will continue, but the decision here is Fireplume Phoenix or True Silver champion on this turn. True Silver is more tempo over 2 turns, but it does stop you from playing Servant of Kalamos on turn 5, which is just such a powerful play.
I like the True Silver champion way more. As you said, the tempo play on board with the second charge of the weapon screams value. At the same time, the Grime Street Enforcer is actually having benefit because of that, because you have more minions in hand.
That makes sense. So you want to go True Silver on 4 and then Enforcer on 5 and then start going maybe, Phoenix into Kalamos from there in the future?
Exactly. You're playing against a Shaman that has 2 Talk Creepers on the board.
Yes.
You're not afraid of dying fast.
No, of course not. It's just, how powerful you can be the person putting pressure on the opponent if you go down the Servant of Kalamos line, is my thinking. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Fireplume Phoenix into Kalamos curve on 4 and 5, but still, seems solid to go down this line. This will probably signal, as you said, that he's going to end up going Grime Street Enforcer on the following turn, and then that will add some extra buffs to his hand, especially since this Elemental is just about to get dealt with.
Exactly. And another thing is that when you play Grime Street Enforcer on turn 5, and if it doesn't get killed for whatever reason, you can just play Spike Ridge Steed on it, make it almost invincible to whatever it is apart from Hex, and get infinite buffs from the effect on it.
It's a huge amount of resources to potentially dump into a Hex, though. To have a 5-drop with a 6-mana spell invested in it against Shaman, that would be a huge risk for Kalento to take.
That's true, but if you just play the Enforcer and it doesn't die on turn 5,
yes,
that means there's no Hex.
More than likely, yes. Yeah.
Because if it's either damage or Hex, it has to be one.
Yep.
If neither are being played, there's no answer.
That's fair. Fireplume Phoenix now has been picked up for Team Germany. You saw JJ just miming the bird flapping its wings animation there just for a second. Turned to life coach, flapped his arms a bit and said, "Do we play the birdie?" Yes, JJ, you play the birdie.
Macaw. Oh no, wait, that's not the one.
That's not a macaw, no. It's a phoenix. What noise does a phoenix make, Lothar?
Never heard one.
Okay. Do you not have phoenixes native in Poland?
That would be actually amazing. And we have unicorns as well.
But here we go. JJ now picks up the power curve that I was just talking about. Fireplume into Kalamos off the top. So that is going to potentially establish him as the aggressor, but it would mean leaving up that Grime Street Enforcer for another turn if he wants to go for it.
Grime Street Enforcer for another turn spells disaster. It's one of the cards kind of like Gazeton, Auctioneer. You just can't leave it around. Even though your opponent, well, okay, maybe you can leave it around when he has no cards in hand. But when there are 6 cards, and you know that 2 of those are minions that were generated by the Igneous Elemental,
yes,
they will become 1-mana 3/4s. That's actually a huge problem.
That is a huge deal, yeah, based on the information of them being there. The problem is, if you Hex this, you can't develop an Elemental, so that means you don't even get to Kalamos next turn. If you Lightning Storm, same problem. The only way you can kill this and develop an Elemental this turn to be able to play Kalamos on the following turn is to Maelstrom Portal and double trade into this, which is just a miserable, miserable turn for you. But he is going to choose to go for it here as JJ and Team Germany.
Right?
Yeah, but he hasn't played an Elemental this turn, that's what I'm saying. So now he can't Kalamos on the following turn still. He has to go Hot Spring Guardian on the following turn and then go from there.
Good point. Outfitter, that was the name.
What did we say?
Informant.
Ah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, Grime Street Outfitter. Totally right, of course.
Has actually a lot of value as well. So let's see. It can be the Fireplume Phoenix this turn, just to finish off that pesky Tar Creeper, and then still play the Outfitter to buff multiple minions, or I mean the other way around. So the Phoenix will be even bigger. A 5/5 creature right now, if I'm not mistaken, triggers the 7th of Kalamos for an upcoming turn, and he will have multiple 1-mana 3/4s.
Looks good. Just going to snipe out the Enchanted Raven here again. That Tar Creeper just being ignored for as long as possible. It's just not a relevant threat as a 1/5. Yes, it can trade into the 1/1 in this situation, but it's just not anything that represents pressure on you, so you do not have to deal with it. And You can tell Kalento just enjoys this deck. There's something about buffing his hand that just makes Kalento happy.
Well, killing the Enchanted Raven actually makes sense because of the fact that the Phoenix is a 5/5. And you have the Truce of a Champion that was being played on 10-4, still have the charge. So if the Tower Creeper is still alive and didn't trade with the Outfitter, it just dies to a 5/5 Phoenix. If it trades, then it dies to the Truce of a Champion, and then the Phoenix gets value with another trade or just goes face. You saw the 7th Kalimos stats and you were laughing.
Yes.
How much was it?
7/8.
7/8, and it gives you a Kalimos, most likely.
Yes.
So,
or a Blaze Caller, or a Fire Elemental. 5 mana, 7/8, draw something broken is basically what that card says on it right now.
correct. But one card that we didn't talk about is the Hydrologist, a 2 mana 2/2 Murloc that gives you a 1 mana secret from the Paladin. It's actually way better than everyone thought.
It's extremely powerful, yeah. And again, it's a lesson that it's a trap that people fall into over and over again. It's like, yeah, okay, it's a 2 mana 2/2 and it gives you a bad card because most Paladin secrets are bad cards. The difference is bad cards for free that you don't have to put in your deck are still very, very effective. Getaway Kodo, for example, is an unplayable card if you have to actually put it in your deck. When you pick it up for free, and then suddenly you just have another Servant of Kalamos or Fire Elemental or God knows what else in your hand, suddenly that's just insane value. So yeah, Hydrologist is a card that we will be seeing a lot more of in the future if Paladin continues to be powerful.
Especially with the amount of secrets that you're getting out of the Hydrologist. There are not that many.
Right.
So the chances of actually getting what you want to have are high. Also, it's very, let's say, sneaky beaky against, against mages.
Yes, the classic eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye, when they are being popped from the ice block, is actually game-winning. I love to do it. You just keep it in your hand like a sacrificial pact till the last moment and you play it.
Yeah, because both the Quest Mage and the Freeze Mage don't actually have any real healing.
Yeah.
So once you pop them at 1 and then play Eye for an Eye, that is the end of the game. That is checkmate. They have nothing in their deck that can beat that.
Exactly. The one thing that can happen is a draw if they like you're at 10 HP and someone will Pyroblast you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. 7th of Kalimos into 7th of Kalimos seems like a good deal, but the problem is your opponent's 7th Kalimos is actually 7/8.
It's a little bit more impressive than yours is, yeah. And this is about to get worse and worse and worse because Kalento is now going to, having stuck a board, going to be able to land Spike Ridge Steed. That's going to mean that there's 2 huge targets on the board that can potentially get a need to demand a Hex from Team Germany. There's only 1 Hex able to be played here. Hex and Storm might be enough to get them out of trouble next turn, but there's still plenty more value to come from Kalento, and we might be about to see those Hydrologists into Getaway Kodos having a big impact on this game.
Hydrologist is a cool card, but I was actually thinking about Ragnaros this turn. There's a Kodo though. Okay, let's focus on the Hydrologist first, because the Gateway Kodo here doesn't really give you much value with the Flame Elementals.
Yeah, he's Spike Ridging this turn anyway, though, so he's expecting these to get dealt with at some point, and then the Getaway Kodo will just be more powerful in the future. Trading with his Spike Ridge minion to play around Hex, make sure he gets some value out of that first.
Pretty cool move.
Pushing damage to the face with his other minions just to get the pressure on, because Kalento is running out of cards just a little bit in hand right now. There isn't a great deal of card draw in this deck, only really those servants that are able to pick him up more value, and he's already used his first one of those, as you see on the board, as that ridiculous 7/8 draw a card.
And the semi-draw from Hydrologist. That's actually what you get.
Yep.
But are very valuable. So, definitely interesting deck. Maybe I'll just sleeve it up as well.
This deck's a lot of fun. It's amazing that, you know, Handbuff effects didn't really get much help in the new rotation. Like, yeah, Firefly and those elemental generating cards are good for hand buffs, but it's just the freedom of suddenly Totem Golem disappearing from the format, that suddenly you can play a 2-mana 1/1 on turn 2 and you don't immediately lose the game because of some of the other cards that have disappeared.
Man, I just got a PTSD from the free generation out of... Oh my god, I forgot the name of the card. 3/2 that generates a totem, random totem.
Tuskar Totem.
Tuskar Totemic with a Totem Golem was just obnoxious.
There you go. So Glacial Shard being picked up here and is going to be able to freeze out that 7-8 for at least one turn. Maybe allow Team Germany to get some Lightning Storm value on the following turn without taking too much damage themselves. But these hits do just keep on coming here from Kalento. But the getaway Kodo with the Rag Light Lord is again a little bit awkward because of that Flame Elemental that's still on the board. If he gets Hydrologist back, fine. That's fine. We'll take that. But the Flame Elemental, not too great in this spot.
The problem is that the Flame Elemental was played before Hydrologist.
Yes.
So in case an AoE effect will be used and they both die at the same time, it's still Flame Elemental that will get back to your hand.
Well, interestingly, he's probably going to trade the Hydrologist into the 2/4 here, which means if JJ was to AoE first, then the Hydrologist would die before the fire elemental, or flame elemental, sorry, would. So he'd actually get the Hydrologist back in that situation.
That is correct. Also, his Hex is no longer alive, so he can't get a Frog back.
Also true. But he's going to choose to go down a different line here, taking the board with the Fire Plume Phoenix, just pushing damage as much as he can, and this is going to need to be a huge swing from the Lightning Storm here, but so much health on board. There's 8 health, 5 health, and 4 health in play, but that Maelstrom Portal pickup, this could be game-winning. Spell damage alongside these two can go for a maximum of 6 damage to the board, allow his 2 remaining 1/2s to take out the 7-8 50% of the time if the Lightning Storm high rolls. That could have been a full clear if he hit spell damage.
But he didn't.
He did not.
And he can't hit a 1-drop that has spell damage. Unfortunately. Can you imagine that, actually?
A 1-mana card with spell damage?
Yeah.
It sounds,
0/1.
Sounds like a card they'd give to Shaman.
It doesn't have to be if it's, you know, randomly played from Maelstrom Portal. So if they plan to actually use Storm first, is there a world where they can't use they won't use Maelstrom Portal? They need to high roll on the Phoenix, and that's basically it.
Yeah, there was definitely a world where they just developed Guardian this turn, so the sequencing probably does end up being correct. Of course, you're referring to potential spell synergy minions that you can get out of the Maelstrom Portal, Mana Worm in particular, as well as Arcane Anomaly. But there was definitely a world where they just developed Hot Spring Guardian that turn, which makes it make a lot of sense just to play it in that order. And now, Rag Light Lord, get away Kodo, don't play the Firefly, smack him in the face. This looks like a solid turn, Lothar.
Looks like an amazing turn, and it spells just GG all over the place, unless Germany will draw a Hex.
That's true. That would actually break up a lot of plans here, because it would answer the board state, and it would mean that Kalento will get a nice, juicy 0/1 Frog in his hand instead of one of these huge elementals.
Here's the face, which is, unfortunately for Ukraine, not really the best outcome. He would rather have the 7/4 being healed, the 7 of Kalimos. But look at that. This is the moment where the elemental deck suddenly becomes not effective. They didn't trigger the elemental keyword in the previous turn, so cards like 7 of Kalimos or Stone Sentinel in this case are terrible. 5 mana 4/5, 7 mana 4/4.
Yeah, doesn't seem great. It's just going to have to be Hot Spring Guardian, maybe develop the Yeti here. Yeah, they are just going to develop, put the damage onto as many places as possible just to play around it as best they can. Means that Rag Light Lord can now hit any given target. Grime Street Outfitter to buff here. Is that even worth playing with the state of the board that you have right now?
I don't think you play anything actually this turn, because you know that you have the Gateway Kodo, your opponent didn't have Hex. They might have actually an elemental for the next turn because they played the 7th of Kalimos for no apparent reason.
Yep.
So first of all, they want to get back on the board, and the last card is most likely an elemental that requires an elemental played last turn. If it would have been Blaze Caller, we would still see the 7th of Kalimos being played this turn as well. So you don't exactly have a read what it is exactly, but it might be Kalimos, it might be Blaze Caller, it might be Fire Elemental, just to help out with those minions here.
He is going to play it. He's just going to generate maximum pressure on the board here. So there's, like you said, there's a hard read that that card in hand is potentially an elemental synergy. So that means that he has to think about Blaze Caller, which means if he trades with the Rag Light Lord here into the 2/4, then that becomes a perfect Blaze Caller target 33% of the time, or 66% of the time if Light Lord doesn't heal itself. So maybe the 7/4 goes in and the 8 damage goes to face. This also has the auxiliary effect of the 8/7 just representing lethal by itself if it connects again the next turn. And the heal goes to the best possible place. Full heal back to that 7/8 Servant of Kalamos, which has been there now for what, 4 turns it's been on the board attacking?
I think it was 4 because it was frozen for 1 turn. Now suddenly Germany are top-decking the Hex 1 turn too late. Although they will still bounce back the Frog because of the fact that the Defender from the Secret will not pop out on the board since we have 7 minions on the board.
Right.
So right now it's an useless effect, but it, it will have a surprising surprise effect on Germany.
Hex is pretty much the perfect pickup for them to go alongside that Stone Sentinel now, but they're going to Hex the Light Lord. They are going to trade the Frog, which will give Kalento back the Frog in the hand, and then the 4/5 takes a 3/3 off the board, which means, is there still lethal in play? There is not. One of the 2/3 taunts cannot get taken down to allow the 7/8 to hit face, but now the Noble Sack is proccing, which means the 3/3 cannot get killed, and that is going to be Kalento ending the game for the Ukraine and ending the series 3-2.
What a game. Handbuff Paladin winning. In a style, actually.
I told you, man, like Kalento just believes in this deck. No one else is really playing this kind of thing. I saw Savitz messing around with it a little on stream, but you know, Savitz generally just plays decks that he enjoys. He's not trying to build the most competitive decks, whereas Kalento is always trying to push for those high reaches of ladder wherever he can. But Kalento just believes in this deck, man. He thinks it is very, very powerful. And based on that performance, it's hard to argue with him. That was just a crushing display of value against a deck that was trying to do similar things to his. His deck just seems to do it much, much better.
Much, much better because of the aspect they had been playing elementals. They have the same exact creatures apart from Kalamos, but they're just stronger on stats.
Yes. It seems like a fairly simple equation to me, and there you see the final shake-up of this Clash of the Titans in the Hearthstone Global Games. Ukraine defeating Germany by the finest of margins, 3-2, coming down to perhaps the 2 of the most experienced players out of the entire 8-player lineup. Super JJ and Kalento were the guys trusted to be the ace players, and it's Kalento's Handbuff Elemental Paladin that got the job done in the end. Thoughts on the series as a whole, life coach? Lothar, there you go.
Not even similar.
Not even close.
It was a very exciting matchup, actually. We had seen Freeze Mage. We had seen an insane Priest with Great Healing Potion. We have seen Handbuff Paladin, a Midrange Hunter, and...
Bloodbloom Doom Warlock.
Exactly.
Yes.
And also a Control Shaman.
We need a better name for that deck, right? Is it just Control Warlock? Is that what we're doing?
Blood Warlock seems okay.
Something like that, yeah. Let's just do it. Blood Doom, apparently, from Raven. I don't know why that's any better, but there we go.
Blood Warlock seems just
Blood Warlock
more
seems
epic.
Reasonable. Let's do that. But yeah, there is the standings in the group now. Ukraine pick up a win to join Czech Republic at the top there, both with a 3-2 record. That tiebreaker will come into play once we're done with the 10-week round robin. If teams are tied on record, that game record will come into play to break ties. So Czech Republic and Ukraine neck and neck in every possible sense right now, and it's Philippines and Germany who are sitting at the foot of the group right now. Germany, I'm sure, will rise to the top like the creme de la creme of players that they are, but Philippines perhaps have a little bit of work ahead of them.
That is true. It was a harsh opening match for both of those teams, but still a lot of games ahead. 5 weeks of playing, actually.
Yeah, so much more to come and so much more Hearthstone action. But I believe we have, what's the game coming up next? Canada versus France, I believe. And then following that up with our last game of the day, which is the one that I'm excited about, the Ravens excited about, and I'm sure everyone at home is excited about too, especially if you're watching from a certain North American country. It's going to be the United Kingdom versus the United States. But we're going to take a very quick break, and it's going to be France versus Canada coming up immediately after this, cast by Raven and Lothar, I believe. Yes. Don't go anywhere, guys. We will be right back.
We're almost there. Quiet down, everyone. This is not like any of our previous expeditions. This will be far more ambitious. We're stepping into a land of primordial wonder. Infused with astonishing elemental energies. The plant life here holds very unusual properties. So don't touch anything. And while you may be excited to see the local fauna, you might want to make sure they don't see you. Because their powers of adaptation are devastating. Make no mistake, we will be tested at every turn. But if we stay on our guard, we might just survive. Now then, are you ready? Then let's journey into Ongoro Crater.